She was looked down on at graduation for being poor, but a millionaire saw it all. Jennifer Wilson could barely contain her emotions as she held her fashion technical school diploma. 3 years of immense sacrifices, cleaning classrooms after hours while other students went back to their comfortable homes. All that effort to support her young son Ethan and still pay tuition for the course she had dreamed of. That's when Principal Margaret Stevens, with her fake smile, unexpectedly took the microphone. Before we conclude this graduation, I'd like to especially congratulate our student Jennifer. After all, not everyone can clean the classrooms at night and sit in them during the day, right? The auditorium at the New York Fashion Technical School fell completely silent. Muffled laughter began to rise from a few corners. Jennifer felt her face burn with shame as involuntary tears streamed down her cheeks. "You had no right," Jennifer murmured, barely able to speak. "Oh dear, everyone here knows you cleaned the classrooms. I just wanted to highlight your persistence," the principal retorted, her voice dripping with false sweetness. At the back of the auditorium, sitting discreetly in the last row, Richard Montgomery watched the scene with sharp eyes. The textile businessman had only come out of social obligation, as his company was one of the event's sponsors. He hadn't expected to witness such a display of gratuitous cruelty. While the graduates tossed their hats in celebration, Jennifer clutched her diploma to her chest and tried to quickly escape the scene. Little Ethan, who had been waiting for his mother in the side hallway of the auditorium, ran to her as soon as he saw her. "Mummy, are you crying?" the 7-year-old asked, confused. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Mummy's just emotional because she has her diploma now," she replied, forcing a smile as she wiped her tears. As she hugged her son tightly, Jennifer didn't notice she was being watched by the businessman, who now stood just a few feet away. 3 days passed, and life returned to its exhausting routine. Jennifer was now working full-time at a small sewing workshop in New York City's garment district, where she and 5 other seamstresses did repairs and alterations for local stores. The pay was meager, barely enough to cover rent for the tiny apartment she shared with Ethan and put food on the table. On that hot December afternoon, Jennifer was focused on her sewing machine when the workshop's doorbell rang. The owner, Mrs. Jenkins, went to answer. "Jennifer, someone's here to see you," she called, curiosity in her voice. When Jennifer looked up from her machine, she couldn't hide her surprise. Standing at the entrance of the small workshop was the same man she had briefly noticed at graduation, tall, graying at the temples, impeccably dressed. "Miss Jennifer Wilson?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Montgomery, from Montgomery Textiles." Jennifer quickly wiped her hands on her apron before shaking his hand, feeling completely out of place. "How can I help you?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. "I'd like to discuss an opportunity. Could we speak privately?" Mrs. Jenkins immediately offered her small office in the back of the workshop, giving Jennifer a curious look. Once seated, Richard got straight to the point. "I was at your graduation, and honestly, I was impressed by your determination. Montgomery Textiles needs someone with your profile for our design department. I'd like to offer you a position." Jennifer looked at him skeptically. "Mr. Montgomery, I appreciate the offer, but I don't want charity. If you're doing this out of pity after what happened at graduation, this isn't charity, Miss Wilson," he interrupted firmly. "I saw your portfolio during the final exhibition at the school. Your talent is undeniable. The company needs people like you." Jennifer hesitated. The offer seemed too good to be true. A job at the largest textile company in the country could completely change her life, and Ethan's. "I need to think about it," she finally replied. "I have a young son to raise alone and commitments here at the workshop." "I understand," said Richard, leaving his card on the table. "The position will be open when you decide." That night, as she tucked Ethan into bed in the small room of the house she shared with 2 other families on the outskirts of New York City, Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about the offer. "Mommy, why are you so quiet?" asked Ethan, hugging his worn-out teddy bear. "Just thinking about some work things, sweetheart," she replied, smoothing the thin blanket over him. "Is it because of that man in the suit who came to see you today?" "Mrs. Jenkins told me when I went to pick you up." Jennifer smiled. Ethan had always been too observant for his age. "Yes, he offered me a job at a big company." "Are you going to take it?" Her son's simple question echoed in her mind as she washed the dinner dishes. Her whole life, Jennifer had fought for every little thing, ever since Ethan's father left. Then, when the boy was just 2, she'd sworn never to depend on anyone. A week passed and the old sewing machine Jennifer used at the workshop broke down. The part needed to fix it would cost nearly half her monthly salary, and without the machine she couldn't work. "I'm sorry, Jennifer, but I can't advance your pay again," Mrs. Jenkins explained with a sympathetic look. "Business is tough. For all of us." That night, Jennifer pulled Richard Montgomery's card from the drawer where she'd kept it. With trembling hands, she dialed the number. The next morning, she stood before the imposing Montgomery Textiles building in the Upper East Side. The contrast between this luxurious place and the small workshop in the garment district couldn't have been greater. "Good morning. I have a meeting with Mr. Richard Montgomery," she told the receptionist, acutely aware of her simple dress. "Oh yes, Miss Wilson, isn't it?" the young woman replied politely. "Mr. Montgomery is expecting you. 5th floor, main. Conference room." Stepping into the mirrored elevator, Jennifer took a deep breath. She was taking a big step, and she needed to make it clear from the start that she didn't want special favors. Richard greeted her with a warm smile. "Miss Wilson, I'm so glad you decided to accept my invitation." "I haven't accepted yet, Mr. Montgomery," she replied, keeping her stance firm. "I came to hear the details of the offer and set some conditions." He looked surprised but gestured for her to continue. "If I take this job, I want to be treated like any other employee. No privileges or special treatment. I want to earn my place on merit, not pity." Richard smiled, genuinely impressed. "That's exactly the attitude we look for here, Miss Wilson. Let me tell you about the position we have in mind for you." To Jennifer's surprise, the offer was for a design assistant role, not a seamstress. The salary was nearly triple what she made at the workshop, with benefits like health insurance that would cover Ethan. "Why me?" she asked, still wary. "There must be far more qualified candidates." "Academic credentials aren't always the most important thing, Miss Wilson. I've seen your sketches, your aesthetic sense. You have something that can't be taught, raw, talent and drive." After an hour of conversation and a tour of the company's facilities, Jennifer finally accepted the offer. It would start the following week. "I just need one favor," she said before leaving. "On Mondays and Wednesdays, I need to leave at 5 to pick up my son from school. I can make up the time by arriving early or staying later on other days." "That won't be a problem," Richard assured her. "We have other mothers and fathers on the team with similar arrangements." Jennifer left the company feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. This opportunity could change her life and give Ethan the future he deserved. But something about that man and how easily everything had happened left her uneasy. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a story far more complex than she could imagine. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following Monday, Jennifer arrived at Montgomery Textiles 30 minutes early. She wore her best outfit, a simple navy blue dress she had sewn herself, with a small lace detail on the collar, her signature touch on all the pieces she created. Monica, Richard's assistant, greeted her with a polite smile and led her through the design department floor. The curious glances of the other employees followed her, making Jennifer immediately uncomfortable. "This will be your workstation," Monica explained, pointing to a desk with a computer and a drawing board. "Edward, our creative director, is in an external meeting but will be back this afternoon to meet you." Jennifer thanked her and sat down, taking in her surroundings. The department was spacious, with large windows that let in natural light, a luxury for someone used to the cramped, poorly lit space of her small workshop in the garment district. "So you're Uncle Richard's new hire?" A feminine voice interrupted her thoughts. Jennifer turned and saw a young woman about her age, impeccably dressed, with an expression that mixed curiosity and disdain. "Yes, I'm Jennifer Wilson. Patricia Montgomery," the young woman introduced herself, "style coordinator and the owner's niece, in case you didn't catch the last name." The slightly arrogant tone didn't escape Jennifer's notice. "Nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to learning and contributing to the team. Jennifer replied, staying polite. Patricia looked her up and down, pausing briefly on the lace detail of her dress. Interesting handiwork. Did you make it yourself? Yes, it was a personal project. Well, I hope you adjust. Uncle Richard has, let's say, a tendency to bet on unusual talents, Patricia remarked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Some work out, others not so much. Before Jennifer could respond, Patricia had already walked away, joining a group of designers who were watching the scene with curiosity. The morning passed quickly as Jennifer was introduced to processes, systems, and the company's structure. At lunch, she preferred to stay alone, taking the chance to call Ethan's school and confirm that the company secretary would pick him up after class, as Richard had promised to arrange. On her way back to her desk, she accidentally overheard a conversation between Patricia and two other employees. They say he saw her cleaning floors somewhere. Classic case of corporate charity, Patricia murmured, though not quietly enough. She seems so simple for our department, one of the other women replied. Jennifer took a deep breath and kept walking, pretending she hadn't heard. It wasn't the first time she'd faced prejudice, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. That afternoon, Edward Thompson, the creative director, finally appeared to welcome her. Unlike Patricia, he seemed genuinely interested in her work and experience. Richard showed me your portfolio and I was impressed, especially with your adaptations of traditional Northeastern crafts into contemporary fashion, commented Edward, while presenting the company's current projects. That fresh perspective is exactly what we're looking for in our next collection. That sincere remark was like a balm to Jennifer after the cold reception from part of the team. Perhaps, after all, she had really been hired for her talent and not out of pity. Over the following weeks, Jennifer threw herself into her work, absorbing everything she could learn. Her evenings were divided between helping Ethan with his homework and working on her own designs to present at creative meetings. The exhaustion was real, but for the first time in years, she felt she was building a better future for herself and her son. One morning, Richard passed by her department and paused, briefly at her desk. "How are you settling in, Miss Wilson?" he asked in his usual formal tone. "Very well, Mr. Montgomery, I appreciate the opportunity." It was then that his gaze fixed on something on Jennifer's desk, a small bird-shaped brooch she wore pinned to her blouse. "That brooch," he murmured, with an expression Jennifer couldn't decipher. "It's an interesting piece. It was a gift from my grandmother before she passed. She taught me to sew when I was little." Richard seemed about to say something more but hesitated and simply nodded before moving on. Jennifer found his reaction odd, but soon returned to her work. That evening, when she got home, she found Ethan excited. The boy had won a painting kit at school as a prize for a drawing he'd made. "Look, Mom, the teacher said I have talent," he exclaimed, proudly showing her a colorful landscape. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Jennifer replied, hugging him with pride. As she prepared their simple dinner, Jennifer reflected on how things were improving. The new job had allowed them to move into a small apartment just for the two of them. Still, on the outskirts but closer to Ethan's school, the boy seemed happier and had even made new friends. "Mom, why don't you ever talk about my dad?" Ethan suddenly asked as they ate. The question caught Jennifer off guard. Ethan rarely asked about his father. "What do you want to know, honey?" "The kids at school always talk about their dads. Mark said I don't have one because he didn't want me." Jennifer's heart tightened. "That's not true, Ethan. Your father—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Your father wasn't ready to be a dad. That has nothing to do with you, my love. Some people just don't know how to love." "Was he handsome?" Jennifer smiled, remembering the man she'd fallen for during a brief summer years ago. "Yes, he was, and you have his eyes, you know." Ethan grinned, satisfied with that small piece of information. Jennifer knew she'd have to tell him the whole truth someday, but for now this seemed enough. The next day, Edward called Jennifer into a private meeting. The summer collection was nearly ready for presentation, and he wanted her opinion on some pieces. "You have a different eye, Jennifer. You notice details that many of us, immersed in this world for years, overlook," he remarked, showing her the prototypes. Jennifer offered a few adjustment suggestions, feeling valued that her opinion was taken seriously. "There's something else I'd like to discuss with you," Edward continued. Richard suggested you present some of your own designs at the meeting with international buyers next week. It would be a chance to showcase your work. Jennifer couldn't hide her surprise. Me? But I've only been here a little over a month. There are far more experienced designers, and that's exactly why your fresh perspective is valuable. Think of it as a test if you prefer. That was an incredible opportunity, but Jennifer knew she wouldn't be welcomed by everyone, especially by Patricia, who had made it clear, on several occasions, that she considered Jennifer's presence an affront to the company's meritocracy. As she left the meeting, Jennifer crossed paths with Richard in the hallway. He greeted her with a brief nod, but once again, his gaze lingered on the small bird brooch she wore. That brooch, he began, carefully choosing his words. It has a very peculiar design. Reminds me of something I saw a long time ago. My grandmother made it, Mr. Montgomery. She was from rural West Virginia and had a special talent for crafts. West Virginia? His interest seemed to grow. Which region? She was born in a small town called Appalachian Mountains, moved to New York City as an adult. Richard fell silent for a moment, as if the information had stirred a distant memory. Well, Miss Wilson, I hope you're preparing your designs for next week's presentation. It will be an excellent opportunity. Over the following days, Jennifer worked tirelessly on her sketches. She decided to create a small collection that blended traditional American craft techniques with contemporary cuts, something she had learned from her grandmother and had always been her passion. At home, Ethan noticed his mother's excitement. "You seem happy, Mom," he remarked while helping her organize the sketches scattered on the small living room table. "I am, sweetheart. Sometimes life takes curious turns. A few months ago I was cleaning classrooms at night, and now I have the chance to show my work to important people." "The man in the suit likes your work." Jennifer smiled at how Ethan referred to Richard. "I think so. He seems to trust my talent." "I trust you too. You're the best seamstress in the world." Her son's spontaneous hug filled Jennifer with emotion and determination. She was doing all of this for him, to give him the future he deserved. On the day of the presentation, Jennifer arrived early to set everything up. Her designs, already organized in a digital portfolio, were saved on the meeting room computer, ready to be presented after the company's main collection. Patricia walked in as Jennifer adjusted the final details. "Big day for you, isn't it?" she remarked, her smile not quite hiding her displeasure. "You managed in a month what many here work years to achieve." "I'm just doing my job, Patricia," Jennifer replied calmly, "and I'm very grateful for the opportunity." "Of course you are. Who wouldn't be?" Patricia casually approached the computer. "Let me see what you've prepared. Maybe I can offer some tips, since I have more experience with these kinds of presentations." Before Jennifer could respond, Edward entered the room, interrupting the conversation. "Everything ready, Jennifer? The buyers will be here in an hour." "Yes, everything's set." "Great. Patricia, we need you at reception to greet the group of Italian buyers." With one last glance at Jennifer, Patricia left the room. Jennifer didn't realize it, but in those brief moments alone with the computer, Patricia had done something that could completely sabotage her presentation. The meeting began promptly at 10 in the morning. The room was full: international buyers, company executives, and Richard himself, who rarely attended these early presentations. Jennifer felt the weight of responsibility, but she took a deep breath and maintained the professional demeanor she had worked hard to cultivate over the past weeks. The main presentation of the summer collection went off without a hitch. The buyers seemed pleased with Montgomery Textile's proposals, and Edward handled everything with the expertise of someone who had done it hundreds of times before. "Now we'd like to present something special," announced Edward, gesturing for Jennifer to come forward. "Jennifer Wilson is our newest collaborator in the design department and brings an innovative vision we believe represents the future of our brand." Jennifer stood up, feeling all eyes on her. With slightly trembling hands, she clicked to start her presentation. What appeared on the screen, however, weren't her carefully crafted designs, but amateurish, unfinished sketches. Clearly not professional work. An awkward silence filled the room as Jennifer, panicked, tried to understand what had happened. "There's been a technical issue," she explained, struggling to maintain composure while frantically clicking to find her original files. "These aren't my creations." Patricia, seated at the back of the room, hid a subtle smile behind her folder. Her little sabotage had worked perfectly. Richard, sensing the growing discomfort, suddenly stood up. "If I may," he said, walking to the front of the room. "While we resolve this technical hiccup, I'd like to show something." He pulled a small case from his jacket pocket and opened it, revealing an antique brooch, nearly identical to the one Jennifer wore. "This brooch is part of a collection of handmade jewelry I've preserved for over 30 years, Richard explained. "It was created by an extraordinary artisan from West Virginia, with whom I had the privilege of learning much about traditional American textile craftsmanship early in my career." The gazes shifted to the small object and then to Jennifer's brooch. "The resemblance isn't a coincidence," he continued. "The style, the handcrafted metalwork technique, they're unique. And it was precisely this authenticity I recognized in Jennifer's work from the very first moment I saw her portfolio." Edward, picking up on the cue, added, "Jennifer's work carries the same essence that transformed Montgomery Textiles into the company it is today. Respect for traditional craftsmanship combined with innovation in contemporary design." With that unexpected intervention, the buyer's attention was completely redirected. The initial embarrassment turned into genuine curiosity about the story behind those strikingly similar brooches. Seizing the moment, Jennifer managed to find a backup copy of her work in her email and finally presented her original designs. The reception was warm, with several buyers showing particular interest in how she incorporated elements of traditional craftsmanship into modern pieces. After the meeting, as attendees dispersed for a cocktail reception in the lobby, Richard approached Jennifer. "Apologies for the intrusion, Miss Wilson. I sensed something had gone wrong with your presentation and wanted to help." "I truly appreciate it, Mr. Montgomery. I don't understand how my files were replaced." Richard cast a brief glance toward Patricia, who was animatedly chatting with some buyers as if nothing had happened. "Sometimes internal competition can become unfair," he remarked, his tone suggesting he knew exactly what had occurred. "But what matters is how we respond to such situations, and you handled it exceptionally well." "About the brooch," Jennifer began, curious. "It really does look just like mine." "Yes, I noticed that on your first day. Was it made by the same person who crafted yours?" "My grandmother, Antonia Wilson. She made handmade pieces to sell at the local market, but rarely signed her work." A shadow seemed to cross Richard's face. "Antonia Wilson," he repeated, his voice slightly altered. "From the Appalachian Mountains?" "Yes. Did you know her?" Richard seemed about to say something important, but was interrupted by a group of buyers who wanted to say goodbye. "Can we continue this conversation another time, Miss Wilson? Perhaps over lunch next week?" Jennifer agreed, intrigued by Richard's sudden interest in her grandmother. This seemed more than mere coincidence. When she returned to her desk after the meeting, she found an email from Edward congratulating her on her work and informing her that 2 international buyers had shown specific interest in her designs. It was an undeniable professional victory, even after the attempted sabotage. Patricia passed by her desk shortly after, with a forced smile. "Congratulations on your recovery. How convenient that Uncle Richard showed up to save the day. Don't you think? I believe he recognized a problem and acted professionally to solve it," Jennifer replied calmly. "Just as I would have done if someone on the team was in trouble." The comment, made without hostility but with firmness, seemed to unsettle Patricia momentarily. "Just a word of advice, Jennifer. Don't get used to my uncle's protection. In this company, what matters in the end is results. We agree completely. That's why I'm focused on my work, not office politics." Patricia left without responding, but Jennifer knew that small clash was just the beginning. She had claimed a space the owner's niece considered hers by right, and that wouldn't be easily forgiven. That evening, while picking up Ethan from school, Jennifer was still thinking about Richard's strange reaction upon hearing her grandmother's name. Could they have actually known each other? "Mom, you're miles away," Ethan exclaimed, jumping in front of her to get her attention. I told you 3 times that my math teacher praised my project. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Jennifer hugged her son, momentarily pushing work worries aside. That deserves a celebration. How about ice cream before we go home? As they enjoyed ice cream at a small shop near the school, Jennifer watched her son. Ethan had features that reminded her of his father, the shape of his eyes, his easy smile. But there was something in the boy's face that always puzzled her, traits that came from neither her nor his biological father. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" "How fast you're growing up," she replied, pushing those thoughts away. Jennifer's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Miss Wilson? This is Monica, Mr. Montgomery's assistant. He asked me to confirm your lunch for next Tuesday at noon. The company car will pick you up." Jennifer confirmed the appointment, growing more curious about what Richard Montgomery had to tell her about her grandmother, Antonia. The following Tuesday, promptly at 11:40, an executive car from Montgomery Textiles pulled up in front of the company building. Jennifer got in, feeling slightly uneasy about the special treatment. "Where are we headed?" she asked the driver. "To Mr. Montgomery's residence in Beacon Hill. He prefers to have lunch at home for more private conversations." That only heightened Jennifer's curiosity. What could be so private that it warranted lunch at the owner's personal home? Richard Montgomery's mansion was exactly as Jennifer imagined, an imposing structure with perfectly manicured gardens. A housekeeper greeted her at the door and led her to a spacious veranda overlooking the pool, where Richard was already waiting. "Miss Wilson, thank you for accepting my invitation," he greeted, gesturing to a chair at the already set table. "I hope you enjoy West Virginian cuisine. I asked the chef to prepare some regional specialties. That's very kind of you, Mr. Montgomery, and please, call me Jennifer." The lunch began with casual conversation about the company and the aftermath of the previous week's presentation. 2 of the international buyers had placed specific orders, including designs created by Jennifer, a promising start to her career. At Montgomery Textiles, it wasn't until after dessert that Richard finally brought up what seemed to be weighing on his mind. "Jennifer, I need to ask you something that might seem strange. Could you tell me more about your family? Your parents, your grandmother?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment, uneasy with this sudden curiosity about her personal life. "My mother, Helen, passed away when I was 19. I was raised only by my grandmother, Antonia. She never knew her father. As for my grandmother, as I mentioned before, she was an artisan in the Appalachian Mountains. She moved to New York City in the 70s and always made a living from her crafts. She passed away 5 years ago." Richard listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "And your father?" "I never knew him. My mother was very young when she got pregnant, and he didn't want to take responsibility. A story similar to my son's father, actually," she added with a faint ironic smile. Richard stood and walked to a nearby shelf, where he retrieved a carved wooden box. Opening it, he showed Jennifer a collection of small handmade brooches, all with designs similar to the one she was wearing. "I met your grandmother in 1975 during a research trip for my company, which was just starting out back then. I stayed in the Appalachian Mountains for nearly 2 months, learning about traditional weaving and natural dyeing techniques." Jennifer began to feel a strange tightness in her chest, as if something important was about to be revealed. "Antonia was the most talented artisan in the region. She taught me much of what I know about the value of handmade work and the importance of preserving American textile traditions. Montgomery Textiles owes much of its philosophy to those lessons." "Did you have a relationship with my grandmother?" Jennifer asked, starting to connect the dots. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering courage. "We fell in love, Jennifer. It was brief but intense. When I had to return to New York City, I promised I'd come back for her. But that same year I met Eliza at a social event. She became my wife. Family pressures, the class difference. I ended up breaking my promise." Jennifer felt her heart race. The story was beginning to sound eerily familiar. "Mr. Montgomery, are you saying that I never knew Antonia was pregnant when I left? I only found out years later, when I tried to find her again, that she had moved to New York City with a young daughter." I hired investigators, but I could never locate them. Jennifer stood, her legs trembling. Are you telling me you could be my mother's father? My grandfather? Richard nodded slowly. It's a possibility I haven't been able to shake since I saw your brooch. When you mentioned Antonia Wilson from the Appalachian Mountains, everything fell into place. Jennifer sat back down, trying to process this bombshell revelation. If this were true, Richard Montgomery wasn't just her boss, he was her grandfather. The grandfather her mother had never known. Why did you hire me? Was it because of this? Because you suspected this connection? No, Jennifer, I hired you for your talent, which I noticed during your final course exhibition. The brooch caught my attention later, at your graduation, but I didn't make the connection right away. It was only when you mentioned the Appalachian Mountains and your grandmother's name that I began to suspect. Jennifer stood again, too restless to stay seated. I need time to process this, Mr. Montgomery. I completely understand, he replied with visible tension. I only ask that you consider the possibility of us doing a DNA test if you agree, to be certain. And if it's true, what changes? That will depend on you, Jennifer. I have no expectations or demands. I'd just like to get to know you and your son better, if you'll allow me, to make up in some way for the years of absence. Jennifer nodded silently before saying goodbye. During the ride back to the company, her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. How would she tell Ethan about this? How would her grandmother and mother have reacted to this discovery? And most importantly, how would this affect her position at the company? That same afternoon, Patricia abruptly entered the room where Jennifer was working alone on some sketches. I saw when you left with my uncle's driver, she said without preamble. A private lunch at the mansion. Things are moving fast for you, aren't they? Jennifer took a deep breath, determined not to rise to the provocation. It was a business lunch, Patricia, about new projects. Of course it was, retorted Richard's niece with clear disbelief. My uncle has never taken any employee to his home in all these years. Must be a very special project. The insinuating tone made it clear what Patricia was suggesting, and Jennifer felt her face burn with indignation. Your uncle is a businessman who values talent, she replied, keeping her voice steady. If you have any concerns about my professional conduct, I suggest you take it up directly with him or HR. Patricia crossed her arms, clearly annoyed by the assertive response. Just a friendly warning, Jennifer. I know my uncle very well. He has a history of getting involved with women from lower classes. It always ends the same way. He gets bored, and they're left heartbroken or worse. With those words, Patricia left, leaving Jennifer with an even greater sense of unease. Was it possible Richard had other intentions when hiring her? Was the story about Antonia just an elaborate lie to win her trust? When she got home that night, Jennifer found Ethan already asleep. The babysitter, an elderly woman who lived next door and looked after the boy when Jennifer had to work late, told her he had finished all his homework and eaten well, but had a slight fever. I gave him the medicine you always use when he's like this, the woman explained. He fell asleep peacefully. After the babysitter left, Jennifer sat on the edge of her son's bed, watching his serene little face. If Richard's story was true, Ethan had a living great-grandfather, a millionaire. Great-grandfather. How would this revelation affect his life? Jennifer gently brushed her fingers through his hair, noticing once again the features that had always puzzled her. Features that didn't come from her or Ethan's biological father. Could those features come from Richard? Was there a family? Resemblance she had never noticed before. That night, Jennifer barely slept. She rummaged through old photo boxes, searching for pictures of her grandmother and mother when they were young. Nothing in the few photos she had seemed to confirm or deny the story Richard had told her. The next morning, Jennifer called the company to say she'd take the day off to care for her son, who still had a fever. Edward was understanding and wished the boy well. Taking advantage of the day at home, Jennifer decided to visit an old neighbor who had been a close friend of her grandmother's. Mrs. Jenkins, now nearly 80, lived in a small nursing home in Queens. Jennifer left Ethan with the babysitter and drove there. Jennifer, my dear, what a wonderful surprise, Mrs. Jenkins exclaimed as she saw her enter the common area of the home. The two women embraced warmly. Jennifer always visited the older woman on holidays and birthdays, but it had been a few months since she'd last seen her. "How are you, Mrs. Clare? I missed you." "Oh, I'm getting by. These legs aren't what they used to be, but my mind still works. And you? How's the new job? And little Ethan?" Jennifer smiled, briefly sharing about her new job and her son. Then carefully she began to introduce the real reason for her visit. "Mrs. Clare, I came because I need to know more about my grandmother, about her past in the Appalachian Mountains before she came to New York City." The older woman's expression shifted subtly. "Why this sudden interest, Jennifer? I met someone who claims to have known my grandmother back then, a man named Richard Montgomery." Mrs. Clare brought a hand to her mouth, visibly disturbed. "That name, Antonia used to mention it sometimes. In her early years in New York, when we'd have a little wine and memories would surface." "So it's true? They had a relationship?" The woman nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was completely in love with him, a businessman from the city who spent time in the region, researching traditional weaving. When he left, promising to return, Antonia already suspected she was pregnant. She never told him. Why? Pride, my dear. A few months later, she read in the paper that he was engaged to a society girl from New York. She realized it had just been a fling for him, so she decided to raise her daughter alone, far away where no one knew her." Jennifer felt a lump in her throat. "Did my mother know? That her father could be—" "No, dear. Antonia never told Helen who her father was. She only said it had been a true but impossible love. I think she feared the girl would build fantasies or worse, try to find him and be disappointed." Tears began to stream down Jennifer's face. "So Richard Montgomery is my grandfather, my biological grandfather. If he is who he claims to be, yes, but why does it matter now after all this time?" Jennifer briefly recounted her meeting with Richard, the job offer, and the recent revelation. "Be careful, Jennifer," Mrs. Clare advised, gripping her hands tightly. "Rich men like him live in a different world from ours. The rules are different, the values are different. Your grandmother learned that the hard way. He wants to do a DNA test. And what do you want?" The direct question caught Jennifer off guard. "I want the truth. For me, for my mother who never knew, and for Ethan." "Then seek it, my dear. But don't expect the truth to heal all wounds or solve all problems. Sometimes it just brings new questions." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Jennifer returned home with her mind even more unsettled. Mrs. Clare's words confirmed Richard's story, but also warned her of the potential dangers of this discovery. How would this truth impact her professional and personal life? When she arrived, she found Ethan playing in the living room, seemingly recovered from his fever. "Hello, sweetheart. Feeling better?" "Yes, Mommy. Mrs. Wilson made chicken soup and said it's better medicine than syrup." Jennifer smiled, hugging her son. "She's right. What else did you do today?" "I drew a lot. Look." Ethan proudly showed off several drawings scattered on the floor. Jennifer studied them closely, noticing many depicted what looked like a family, a woman, a boy, and a man. "Who's this man in your drawings, Ethan?" "It's the grandpa you never told me about," he replied, with the disarming simplicity of children. "I dreamed about him. He was tall and had hair like this, kind of white here." He pointed to his own temples. Jennifer felt a shiver run down her spine. Ethan had never seen Richard Montgomery, except perhaps very briefly at the workshop months ago. How could he have drawn someone who looked so much like him? Was it just a dream, sweetheart? Yes, but it felt real. He was smiling a lot and said he'd take us to a big house with a pool. That unsettling coincidence left Jennifer uneasy for the rest of the night. She decided she needed definitive answers and, the next morning, called the personal number Richard had given her. "Mr. Montgomery, this is Jennifer. I'd like to accept your proposal for the DNA test." "I'm glad to hear that, Jennifer. We can arrange for it to be done with complete discretion and speed. I have just one condition. Until we know for sure, nothing changes at work. I'm to be treated like any other employee, no privileges or special treatment. You have my word." 3 days later, Jennifer and Richard took the test at a private clinic with a guarantee of absolute confidentiality. The results would take about a week. During that time, Jennifer tried to maintain her normal routine at work, though it was impossible not to notice something had shifted. Patricia watched her interactions with Richard with growing suspicion, and other employees seemed to pick up on subtle preferential treatment from the company's owner. Edward, the creative director, called Jennifer into his office for a private conversation. "Jennifer, I don't know what's going on between you and Mr. Montgomery, and I don't mean to pry," he began, clearly uncomfortable. "But as your direct supervisor, I need to know if there's anything that might affect your work or the team dynamic." "Edward, I appreciate your concern, but I assure you it's strictly professional," she replied, feeling guilty for not being able to tell the whole truth. "Mr. Montgomery simply recognized my work and has taken an interest in mentoring me more directly." Edward didn't seem entirely convinced, but nodded. "All right. Just know you can count on me if you need anything. This industry can be ruthless, especially with rising talent." His protective tone surprised Jennifer. Since she'd started at the company, he'd always been professional and polite, but never showed personal concern. "Thank you, Edward. That means a lot." As she left the office, Jennifer ran into Patricia in the hallway. Richard's niece was accompanied by a man Jennifer had never seen before, well-dressed with a quiet, observant air. "Jennifer, what a coincidence," Patricia exclaimed with false warmth. "I'd like you to meet a friend. This is Mark Thompson, head journalist from the New York Times business section. He's doing a piece on rising talents in the fashion world." Jennifer shook the man's hand firmly, sensing a warning. Why would Patricia introduce a journalist to her? "Miss Wilson, Patricia told me about your inspiring journey," the journalist remarked. "From a technical school janitor to a designer at one of the country's biggest textile companies, a true rags-to-riches story." His condescending tone and assessing gaze made it clear this wasn't genuine praise. "I worked as a cleaning assistant to pay for my education, Mr. Thompson. I don't consider that any less dignified than any other profession," Jennifer replied, keeping her composure. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting in 5 minutes." As she walked away, she could feel their eyes on her back. Patricia was clearly trying to expose her humble background to undermine her, but Jennifer wasn't ashamed of her past. Quite the opposite. She was proud of every obstacle she'd overcome. That evening, while picking up Ethan from school, Jennifer noticed an unusual crowd gathered at the gate. Some parents looked at her and whispered. The boy's teacher approached her with a concerned expression. "Mrs. Wilson, we need to talk about an incident that happened today. Ethan got into a fight with another student." "To fight?" Jennifer couldn't hide her surprise. Ethan had always been a quiet boy. "Apparently the other boy made some comments about you. Ethan reacted by defending you." "What kind of comments?" The teacher seemed uncomfortable. "Something about you getting a job through questionable means. Very inappropriate insinuations for children. I imagine someone close to the other boy spread these rumors." Jennifer felt her face burn with indignation. She managed to stay calm as she thanked the teacher for the information and went to pick up Ethan, who was waiting with his head down in the office. On the way home, the boy finally spoke. "You're not mad at me, Mom?" "Not for defending your mother, sweetheart. But fighting is never the solution. Richard said you only got the job at his company because you two—" Ethan stopped, visibly embarrassed. "Who's Richard, honey?" "The son of the owner of Harrison Fabrics, the textile factory that competes with your company. His dad told him that, and he told the whole class." Jennifer immediately understood what had happened. Patricia had likely spread malicious rumors in their social circles, and those rumors had reached the competitor's son, and consequently, Ethan's school. At home, after putting her son to bed, Jennifer received a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Jennifer Wilson, this is Mark Thompson from the New York Times. We met today at Montgomery Textiles." Jennifer took a deep breath, trying to control her irritation. "Yes, I remember. How can I help you, Mr. Thompson?" "I'm working on a story about favoritism in major textile companies. Sources informed me that you were hired directly by Richard Montgomery after he witnessed an embarrassing incident at your graduation. I'd like to hear your side of the story." I have no interest in participating in that kind of article. Mr. Thompson, if you want information about Montgomery Textile's hiring policies, I suggest you speak with the HR department. I've also received information about a personal relationship between you and Mr. Montgomery. Private lunches, meetings outside work hours. Jennifer hung up, furious. Patricia's strategy was clear: to destroy her professional reputation through insinuations about her personal life. The next day when she arrived at work, Jennifer was immediately called into Richard's office. Her heart raced, fearing the rumors had already reached him. To her surprise, when she entered the B room, Richard didn't seem angry, just concerned. "Jennifer, I just got a call from the lab. The test results are in." All her frustration from the day before vanished instantly. This was the moment of truth, literally. "And?" she asked, barely able to breathe. Richard didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed her a sealed envelope. "I thought you should be the one to open it." With trembling hands, Jennifer opened the envelope and read the results. The document confirmed, with 99.9% certainty, the biological relationship between Richard Montgomery and Helen Wilson, Jennifer's mother. There was no more doubt. Richard was indeed her biological grandfather. "I knew it," Richard murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "From the moment I saw your brooch, I felt a connection I couldn't explain." Jennifer sat down, suddenly dizzy. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. "That's entirely up to you, Jennifer. I'd understand if you want to keep this private, or if you need time to process everything. What about your side of the family? Your wife, Patricia?" Richard's expression closed slightly. "Eliza passed away 5 years ago. As for Patricia and my son Charles, they are my family, but you and Ethan are too. I have the right to acknowledge all my descendants." Jennifer thought of Ethan, of the drawing he had made of a grandfather he'd never met, of the features that had always puzzled her. "I need to think about what's best for Ethan," she said finally, "but also about what's best for me professionally. Rumors about us are already circulating thanks to your niece." Richard seemed surprised. "Patricia? What does she have to do with this?" Jennifer told him about the journalist, the rumors at Ethan's school, and the malicious insinuations. "I'll handle this," Richard assured her, with a hardness in his voice Jennifer had never heard before. "Patricia has gone too far this time. I don't want to create more family problems for you. Jennifer, you are my family. The daughter I never knew had a daughter, and that daughter has a son. You are my legacy just as much as Charles and Patricia." Those words, spoken with such conviction, touched Jennifer deeply. All her life she had felt the absence of a larger family. Her mother had died young, her grandmother was already gone, and Ethan's father had abandoned them. The idea that Ethan could have a great-grandfather in his life was tempting. "Let's take it slow," she proposed, "for everyone's sake, especially Ethan's." Richard agreed, and they arranged an informal dinner that weekend so he could properly meet Ethan. As Jennifer left the room, Patricia intercepted her in the hallway. "Another private meeting with my uncle?" she asked with false sweetness. "Must be a very important project." Jennifer was about to respond when Richard's office door opened again. "Patricia, I need to speak with you immediately," he said in a tone that brooked no refusal. For the rest of the day, rumors spread through the company. Patricia had left Richard's office in tears and had left the building without speaking to anyone. Some speculated she had been fired, others that she had received a severe reprimand. Jennifer tried to focus on work, ignoring the curious glances and whispers. At the end of the day, she received a message from Richard. "Patricia has been temporarily removed from the company. Would it be possible for you and Ethan to come to dinner at my house this Saturday? I would very much like to properly meet my great-grandson." The Saturday gathering was surprisingly peaceful. Ethan, with his childlike ease, readily accepted the idea that Richard was his newly discovered great-grandfather. The boy was enchanted by the mansion, especially the pool and game room Richard had prepared especially for the visit. "You look just like the man in my dream," Ethan exclaimed upon meeting Richard, leaving Jennifer once again amazed by her son's intuition. While Ethan explored the garden under the housekeeper's supervision, Jennifer and Richard talked at Length about the past, about Antonia and Helen, about the lost years. I'd like to make up for my absence in Helen's life somehow, Richard said with evident regret. And in yours too, Jennifer. We can't change the past, she replied gently, but we can build a different future. Ethan deserves to know his history, his family. At the end of the evening, as they were about to leave, Richard handed Jennifer a small box. It belonged to your grandmother, he explained. Antonia gave me this brooch before I left, as a symbol that we would meet again. I'd like you to have it. The brooch, identical to the one Jennifer wore but in better condition, bore a small inscription she had never noticed on hers. May our paths always cross again. Tears welled in Jennifer's eyes. Her grandmother had kept a matching brooch all those years, never forgetting the love she had lived. On Monday, when Jennifer arrived at work, she found the department in an uproar. The news had leaked. She was the biological granddaughter of Richard Montgomery. Official confirmation came at noon when Richard gathered the company's top executives for an announcement. As some of you may have already heard, I recently discovered that Jennifer Wilson is my biological granddaughter, he declared with Jennifer by his side. This is a personal discovery that does not change the professional structure of the company in any way. Jennifer will remain in her current position, evaluated solely on her performance and talent like any other employee. Edward was the first to approach after the announcement, with a genuine smile. That explains a lot, he remarked. Talent certainly runs in the blood. In the days that followed, Jennifer faced mixed reactions, curiosity, envy, and a few who showed genuine happiness for her. Journalist Mark Thompson tried to contact her again, now interested in a story about the secret heiress of the Montgomery Empire, but she politely declined. A week after the announcement, Patricia returned to the company. Her leave had been temporary, a personal decision by Richard so she could reflect on her actions. The encounter between the two was tense but civil. I hope you're satisfied, Patricia commented when she ran into Jennifer in the hallway. You achieved in a few months what I've sought my entire life, his recognition. I never sought this, Patricia, Jennifer replied sincerely, and I'm still the same person I was before. I'm not here to take your place or compete for Richard's affection. Patricia studied her for a moment, as if trying to determine the truth of those words. My father was always the son who lived in the shadow of the great Richard Montgomery. I promised myself I'd be different, that I'd prove my worth, and then you show up out of nowhere with a blood tie I can never have. Blood doesn't determine who we are or what we deserve, Patricia. Our actions do. Pretty speech from the person who just won a golden ticket to the top. I don't want the top, Patricia. I never did. I just want to raise my son with dignity and do the work I love. Something in Jennifer's sincerity seemed to strike Patricia, who walked away without responding. That wouldn't be the last time they clashed, but it was the beginning of a fragile mutual understanding. In the weeks that followed, Jennifer and Ethan's lives underwent gradual changes. At Richard's request, they moved to a comfortable house closer to school and the company. Ethan began spending some weekends with his great-grandfather, developing an affectionate relationship that surprised everyone. At work, Jennifer kept her position as design assistant, insisting on earning every promotion through merit. Her collection, inspired by American craftsmanship, was approved for production, though with a launch planned for the next season. One day, Richard called her for a special conversation. Jennifer, I'm planning something important and would like your participation. I want to create a foundation in honor of your grandmother and mother, dedicated to preserving American craft. Techniques and training young talents from underprivileged communities. The proposal moved Jennifer deeply. It was a way to honor not only Antonia's talent, but also her dedication to preserving the traditions she loved so much. The Antonia Wilson Foundation would operate independently of Montgomery Textiles to avoid conflicts of interest. I'd like you to be part of the board of directors, bringing your vision and experience. Jennifer accepted immediately, seeing the proposal as an opportunity to turn her own story into an instrument of change for other young talents who, like her, faced social and economic barriers. Ironically, it was Patricia who brought the idea that completed the project. an annual design competition for students at technical schools, with scholarships and internships at the company for the winners. After all, that's how you started, isn't it? She remarked with less hostility than Jennifer expected. And maybe you're right. Merit should speak louder than a last name. 6 months after discovering their family ties, Jennifer received an unexpected invitation. The same technical school where she had been humiliated at her graduation now asked her to be the guest speaker for the new class. Principal Margaret Stevens had been removed following reports of bullying against other scholarship students, and the new administration wanted to mark a change in attitude. Jennifer hesitated at first, the memories of her humiliation still fresh in her mind. But after a frank conversation with Richard, she decided to accept. Sometimes, Jennifer, the best revenge is showing how much you've thrived despite their attempts to bring you down, he advised. On graduation day, the auditorium was completely packed. Richard, Ethan, Edward, and even Patricia attended to support Jennifer. As she stepped onto the stage to give her speech, she felt a mix of nerves and determination. A little over a year ago, I was sitting where you are now, holding my diploma and thinking about the future, she began. The path I've walked since then has been unexpected and full of surprises. I've learned that our origins don't determine our destiny, but our perseverance does. Jennifer glanced at Richard in the audience, who watched her with visible pride. I've also learned that family isn't just defined by blood, but by choice, by love, and by mutual respect. You graduates are about to begin a new journey. You'll carry with you the technical knowledge you've gained here, but also your personal stories, your struggles, and your victories. Never be ashamed of who you are or where you come from. Use your story as strength, not as a limitation. Jennifer's words deeply moved the audience. By the end of her speech, the entire room rose in an emotional standing ovation. For many of those young graduates, coming from humble backgrounds like hers, Jennifer represented the real possibility that talent and determination could, in fact, overcome barriers. After the ceremony, as she received congratulations from the graduates, Jennifer spotted a familiar figure approaching. Mrs. Jenkins, the former owner of the sewing workshop where she had once worked. Jennifer, my dear, what a joy to see you here, being honored. The two women embraced warmly. Mrs. Jenkins, what a wonderful surprise. How's the workshop? Oh, I don't work there anymore. Actually, I came because I have a proposal for you. I'm setting up a seamstresses cooperative in the garment district, with support from an NGO. We could use your experience and connections. Richard, who had approached to congratulate Jennifer, overheard the conversation and interjected, Ma'am, I think your idea could fit perfectly with the Antonia Wilson Foundation project. Jennifer can explain the details. The way Richard spoke, not as the powerful businessman but as someone genuinely interested, impressed Jennifer. He had changed over the past months, becoming more open and less formal. Ethan's presence in his life seemed to have awakened a more human and approachable side that few had seen before. That evening, Jennifer, Ethan, and Richard dined together at a simple restaurant, celebrating the new chapter in their lives. As Ethan excitedly talked about his school project, Jennifer watched the interaction between her son and Richard. The affection between them was visible and genuine. You know, Great-Grandpa, said Ethan with the spontaneity of children, before I met you, I used to draw a man with white hair here by his ears. I think I was drawing you without even knowing it. Richard smiled, moved. Some connections. Just stronger than time or distance, Ethan. Maybe you always knew we'd be part of each other's lives. Jennifer felt tears welling in her eyes. She thought of her grandmother Antonia, who had never revealed the name of the man she loved, but kept his brooch her entire life. She thought of her mother Helen, who grew up without knowing her father, but passed the same artistic talent to her daughter. And she thought of Ethan, who in some mysterious way had recognized his great-grandfather before even meeting him. So our paths may always cross again, she murmured, repeating the inscription on Antonia's brooch. What did you say, Mom? Ethan asked curiously. Just that I'm happy our paths finally crossed, she replied, smiling at Richard. A year after that dinner, Jennifer's life had completely transformed. The Antonia Wilson Foundation was in full operation, offering courses and scholarships for young talents in underserved communities across the country. Her collection, inspired by American craftsmanship, had been a critical and commercial success, solidifying her position as one of the most promising designers of the new generation. Patricia, surprisingly, had become an important ally in the foundation, contributing her marketing expertise and network of contacts. Their initial rivalry had given way to a cautious, mutual respect. Ethan, now 8 years old, was thriving in school and showing the same artistic talent that seemed to be a family trait. His drawings already displayed a unique eye for shapes and colors, which Richard proudly attributed to Wilson Montgomery genetics. As for Richard, the stern and formal businessman had given way to a more open and human man. Jennifer and Ethan's presence in his life had filled a void he hadn't even known he carried. Though the pain of never having known his daughter Helen remained, the chance to connect with his granddaughter and great-grandson felt like a form of redemption. One day, while visiting the Foundation's headquarters, Jennifer found a group of students practicing embroidery techniques her grandmother had taught her. "This is a tradition from the Appalachian Mountains, my dears," she explained, showing them how to position their hands. "My grandmother used to say every stitch carries the story of the person who made it." Looking up, she saw Richard watching from the doorway. "She would be proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Antonia always believed American craftsmanship deserved recognition and appreciation. And now, thanks to her and to you, dozens of young talents have the chance many of us never did," Jennifer replied. That night, as she tucked Ethan into bed, Jennifer noticed him studying the brooch Richard had given her. "Does this bird mean something special, Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. It's a blue jay, a bird native to West Virginia. Your great-grandmother Antonia said it symbolizes freedom and also loyalty, because it always returns to the same place to build its nest. Like us, coming back to great-grandpa Richard's family." The boy's insight surprised Jennifer. "Yes, exactly like us. There are moments when life seems to follow the perfect script of a novel, the public humiliation that turns into opportunity, the mysterious businessman who turns out to be long-lost family, the rival who becomes an ally. But the true beauty of Jennifer's story wasn't in the grand dramatic moments, but in the small daily victories, the respect earned through her work, the dignity maintained even in the toughest times, and above all, the unconditional love for her son that kept pushing her forward. The seamstress, who had been publicly humiliated for cleaning classrooms to pay for her studies, had become a respected designer, a granddaughter reunited, and most importantly, a mother who could look her son in the eyes with the pride of someone who never bowed to adversity. And when Ethan asked about the hard times, Jennifer always answered with a smile. "They weren't hard times, my love. They were times of learning. They taught me that our worth isn't in what we have or where we come from, but in what we choose to be each new day." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, on a particularly cold winter afternoon in New York City, Jennifer received a call that would once again change the course of her life. Margaret Stevens, the director who had humiliated her at graduation 2 years earlier, urgently requested a meeting. Jennifer hesitated at first. The wounds from that day had healed, but the idea of facing the woman who had tried to publicly belittle her was unpleasant. Eventually, driven by curiosity and a strange sense that this chapter needed closure, she agreed to meet. They chose a neutral cafe, far from both the New York Fashion Technical School and Montgomery Textiles. Jennifer arrived promptly and found a very different Margaret from the haughty, arrogant woman she remembered. Sitting alone at a corner table, she seemed smaller, more fragile, almost unrecognizable without her imposing director's demeanor. "Jennifer, thank you for coming," Margaret said as soon as she sat down. "I know it must have been hard to accept this meeting. I admit I was surprised by your call," Jennifer replied, keeping her tone neutral and professional. Margaret took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I came to ask for your forgiveness. Jennifer, what I did at that graduation was unforgivable, cruel and completely senseless. There's no excuse for my behavior, but I want you to know I've never forgiven myself for that moment. The sincerity in the former director's voice was palpable. "Why did you do it?" Jennifer asked, the question that had haunted her for so long. "Envy," Margaret answered without hesitation. "Pure and simple envy. You represented everything I wished I could have been. Talented, determined, with a bright future ahead. I spent my whole life following rules, climbing the ladder through family connections, never truly on merit. And then I saw you. Overcoming every obstacle through sheer effort, and something inside me broke. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. I followed your career, you know," Margaret continued. "I saw when you were hired by Montgomery Textiles, when you discovered your connection to Richard Montgomery, when you founded that wonderful institution for talented young people from underprivileged communities. The Antonia Wilson Foundation," Jennifer added. "Yes, and that's when I realized that despite all the harm I tried to cause you, you turned every obstacle into a stepping stone. It made me rethink my own life." Jennifer studied the woman's face, searching for signs of insincerity or manipulation. She found none, only genuine remorse. "What happened after you left the technical school?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I was lost for a while. Unemployment, public shame, a tarnished reputation, and it was hard. But then, by chance, I started volunteering at a community project in the outskirts. I'm teaching basic sewing classes for women in vulnerable situations." The irony wasn't lost on Jennifer, the woman who had humiliated her for cleaning. Classrooms to pay for her education was now working for free, teaching underprivileged people. "Why are you telling me this now?" Margaret picked up her purse and pulled out some papers. "We're setting up a seamstresses cooperative in partnership with a school uniform company. We need technical guidance, someone who understands both the creative process and the market." "And you thought of me?" Jennifer couldn't hide her surprise. "Actually, I thought of the Antonia Wilson Foundation. It would be a partnership. That benefits both sides. You'd have a new field of work, and our students would have real opportunities for employment and growth." Jennifer quickly reviewed the proposal. It was solid, well-structured, and aligned with the Foundation's principles. The irony of the situation didn't escape her. The woman who had tried to humiliate her was now asking for her help. "I'll review it carefully and discuss it with our team," Jennifer replied professionally. "But it looks promising." As they were about to say goodbye, Margaret made one last comment. "You know, Jennifer, that day at graduation, when I saw Richard Montgomery watching you from the back of the auditorium, I thought he was just interested in you as a woman. I never imagined he was your family. Life has a peculiar sense of humor, don't you think?" Jennifer smiled slightly. "Life has many surprises, Margaret. Some painful, some wonderful. What matters is how we respond to each of them." Leaving the cafe, Jennifer felt a strange sense of closure. The circle that had begun with public humiliation was now closing, with a sincere request for forgiveness and a proposal for professional collaboration. The girl who had cleaned classrooms was now the woman whose support could change lives, including the life of the person who had tried to belittle her. When she recounted the encounter to Richard that evening during a family dinner, Jennifer realized how much she had grown since that graduation day. "What did you say?" Richard asked after listening carefully. "That I'd review the proposal carefully. Actually, I think it's an excellent opportunity for the Foundation to expand its reach." Richard smiled proudly. "Your ability to turn adversity into opportunity never ceases to amaze me, Jennifer." Ethan, who had been listening while drawing at the other end of the table, looked up. "Mom, is that the mean lady who made you cry?" "At your graduation?" he asked with the blunt honesty of a child. "She hurt me deeply that day." "Yes, Ethan," Jennifer replied, choosing her words carefully. "But people can change, learn from their mistakes. Part of growing up is understanding that everyone deserves a second chance." "Like how Grandpa Richard got a second chance to be your family?" the boy asked with a perceptiveness that often surprised adults. "Exactly like that, sweetheart," Jennifer answered, exchanging an emotional glance with Richard. In the following weeks, Jennifer immersed herself in the new cooperative project. The partnership was formalized, and the Antonia Wilson Foundation took on the technical and market guidance of the venture. Margaret, in turn, remained as the educational coordinator, working directly with the women. The cooperative's first major contract was to supply school uniforms for a city-wide education network. Seeing those women, many of them single mothers, as Jennifer had once been, achieve financial independence through their work was deeply rewarding. During one of her supervision visits to the cooperative, Jennifer met Carmen, a woman nearly 70 years old who had worked her whole life as a housekeeper and was now in retirement, learning sewing to supplement her income. "You remind me so much of my grandmother Antonia," remarked Jennifer, watching the delicacy with which Carmen embroidered small details on the garments. She had the same care with every stitch. "Your grandmother must have been quite a woman to inspire. A foundation in her name," Carmen replied without looking up from her embroidery. "She was. She raised my mother alone, then raised me too when my mother fell ill. She never complained, never gave up. I think I inherited her stubbornness." "It's not stubbornness, dear. It's determination. Women like us need that to survive in this world." Those simple words touched Jennifer deeply. Women like us, the immediate inclusion, the recognition of a shared experience, even if their adult lives had taken such different paths. As she headed home that day, Jennifer received an unexpected call from Patricia. "Jennifer, I'm at the hospital with Uncle Richard. He felt unwell during a meeting and was brought to Mount Sinai." "Is it serious?" Jennifer asked, her heart racing. "The doctors are still running tests, but they suspect the early signs of a heart attack. He's asking for you and Ethan." "We're on our way." At the hospital, they found Richard already in his room after initial treatment. Despite his pallor and the monitoring equipment, he smiled when Ethan rushed in. "My champion," he exclaimed, opening his arms for his great-grandson. "Great-grandpa, are you sick?" Ethan asked with genuine concern. "Just a little tired, sweetheart. I'll be as good as new soon." Jennifer and Patricia exchanged a worried glance. Though the doctors assured them the episode had been mild and controlled in time, it was a wake-up call about Richard's health. He was already in his 70s. While Ethan excitedly recounted his day at school, distracting his great-grandfather, the two women spoke quietly in the hallway. "The doctor said he needs to significantly reduce stress," Patricia explained. "But you know Uncle Richard, the company is his life." "Maybe he needs to start delegating more," Jennifer suggested. "Both you and Edward are more than ready to take on greater responsibilities." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "Actually, I was thinking of you too, Jennifer. I know you prefer to keep your distance from the company's administrative matters to avoid accusations of favoritism, but Uncle Richard trusts your judgment. He listens to you in a way he doesn't with anyone else." The sincerity in Patricia's tone surprised Jennifer. Their relationship had evolved over the past few months, but it was still marked by cautious politeness. "I'll do whatever I can to help, Patricia, but you know the company far better than I do. I know the processes, yes, but you understand Uncle Richard, and that's just as important." That night at the hospital marked the beginning of a new phase in Jennifer and Patricia's relationship. Their shared concern for Richard's health created a bond that transcended old rivalries and resentments. In the days that followed, as Richard recovered at home, Jennifer, Patricia, and Edward worked together to reorganize the company's management, allowing him to reduce his workload without feeling he was losing control. A week after his discharge, during a family dinner at the mansion, Richard made a surprising announcement. "I've been thinking a lot about the future. Not just mine, but the company's and our families," he began, looking at each person present. "And I've made some important decisions." Everyone at the table, Jennifer, Ethan, Patricia, Edward, and Charles, Richard's son and Patricia's father, listened intently. "I'll officially reduce my involvement in the day-to-day management of Montgomery Textiles. Charles will take over as chairman, with Patricia as executive vice president and Edward continuing as creative director." No one seemed particularly surprised by this announcement, as it was essentially just formalizing the arrangement they had implemented during her recovery. "As for the Antonia Wilson Foundation, I'd like to expand it significantly. Jennifer will continue leading the creative direction, but I'm inviting Patricia to join the administrative board, bringing her management experience." Now, that was a surprise. Patricia looked at Jennifer as if seeking confirmation that the idea was welcome. "It would be an honor to have your expertise, Patricia," Jennifer said sincerely, "especially now that we're expanding into new areas with the cooperative." Richard smiled, pleased with the positive reception to his proposal. "There's one more thing," he continued, now with a hint of emotion in his voice. "As you all know, I never had the chance to meet my daughter, Helen. That's one of my greatest regrets in life. But life has given me the chance to know my granddaughter and my great-grandson, and that's a gift I intend to cherish every day." He looked directly at Ethan, who watched him attentively. "Ethan, did you know your great-grandfather has a beach house in the Hamptons? It's a special place where I spent many happy moments with my son Charles when he was about your age." The boy's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A beach house with a pool?" "With a pool, a tennis court, and direct beach access," Richard confirmed, smiling. "I was thinking we could all spend some time there, the whole family. Maybe even Christmas and New Year's." The idea of a family Christmas, an extended, unlikely family, bound by blood, affection, and extraordinary circumstances, touched Jennifer deeply. Ethan, of course, was more interested in the pool and the beach. "That would be wonderful, Dad," replied Charles, who had remained relatively quiet throughout the conversation. "It's been a long time since we properly used the Hamptons house." Charles Montgomery, Richard's only legitimate son, had taken the news of Jennifer's existence with surprising calm. Unlike Patricia, who initially saw Jennifer as a threat, Charles seemed genuinely happy about the discovery. "I grew up an only child, always wishing for siblings," he once remarked. "A niece and a great-nephew are an unexpected blessing." In the weeks that followed, Jennifer found herself dividing her time between the foundation, the cooperative, and preparations for the year-end holidays. The idea of spending Christmas in a luxurious beach house, surrounded by a family she hadn't even known existed 2 years ago, still felt surreal. One afternoon, while working on sketches for Montgomery Textile's new collection, Jennifer received an unexpected visitor at her office, Mary Edwards, Charles's wife and Patricia's mother. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," said Mary Edwards, an elegant middle-aged woman, "but I needed to speak with you privately." Jennifer invited her to sit, intrigued. Her interactions with Charles's wife had always been cordial but formal and brief. "It's about Christmas in the Hamptons," Mary Edwards began, nervously adjusting the strap of her designer bag. "We need to talk about expectations and, well, about the past." Jennifer immediately sensed tension. Mary Edwards's tone suggested the conversation would be delicate. "Of course, I'm listening," she replied, maintaining the calm, professional tone she had learned to use in difficult situations. "First, I want you to know I've followed your story, Jennifer. What happened at your graduation, how Richard found you. It's almost unbelievable." "Sometimes it still feels like a dream," Jennifer agreed. Mary Edwards took a deep breath before continuing. "Charles told me everything about Antonia, about Helen, about how Richard never knew about the pregnancy. I want you to know I've never questioned your legitimacy as Richard's granddaughter." "Thank you," replied Jennifer, still uncertain where this conversation was headed. "But Patricia," Mary Edwards hesitated. "She's always had a complicated relationship with her grandfather. She's always sought approval, recognition. And Richard, well, he was never the most emotionally expressive man." Jennifer nodded in understanding. She knew that side of Richard well, though in recent months he had become more open, especially with Ethan. "The time in the Hamptons will be intense. The whole family together for days, without the distractions of work or everyday routines. I'm afraid old resentments might resurface." "I understand your concern," said Jennifer. "But I believe both Patricia and I have matured a lot these past months. Our relationship is much better now." "Yes, but there's another factor," Mary Edwards continued, now visibly uncomfortable. "The house in the Hamptons holds memories. It's where Richard and Eliza, his late wife, spent their honeymoon. It's where Charles grew up, where Patricia spent her summers. It's a place filled with family history." Jennifer began to grasp the real reason for this visit. "Are you worried that my presence and Ethan's might somehow disturb those memories?" Mary Edwards seemed relieved that Jennifer understood without her having to spell it out. It's not about not wanting you there. It's more about honoring the past while embracing the future. Patricia can be difficult at times, but she loved her grandmother Eliza deeply. The idea of celebrating the first Christmas without her, but with you— I completely understand, Jennifer gently interrupted, and I appreciate your honesty. If you prefer, Ethan and I can spend Christmas at our home and maybe join you just for New Year's. No, that's not what I'm asking, Mary Edwards quickly replied. Richard would be devastated. He's so excited about having the whole family together. I just came to ask for your understanding. There might be tense moments, maybe some tears. We're a family learning to reinvent ourselves. Jennifer smiled, touched by her honesty. We're all part of that reinvention, Mary Edwards. Ethan, and I understand we're stepping into a story that existed long before us. We don't want to erase anything, just add new chapters. Mary Edwards seemed genuinely moved by the response. You know, when Charles first told me about you, I'll admit I was apprehensive. I imagined someone opportunistic, only interested in Richard's fortune. But now I see why he speaks so highly of you. The two women talked for a few more minutes, reaching an understanding that went beyond words. When Mary Edwards left, there was an unspoken agreement between them. They would both work to make this Christmas a fresh start for the whole family. In the days that followed, Jennifer and Ethan went shopping for their trip. It was the boys' first time visiting an upscale beach like the Hamptons, and Jennifer wanted him to feel comfortable without standing out too much from the distant cousins he'd meet. Mom, do I really need these new sneakers? Ethan asked as he tried on a sporty pair. My old ones are still fine. You're growing fast, sweetheart, and we'll be away for several days. Besides, it's good to have proper clothes and shoes for all the activities. Great-grandpa said we're going to play tennis and ride bikes on the beach. Ethan's excitement was contagious. For him, the trip was just a fun adventure, free from the weight of family complications that Jennifer felt. On the eve of their departure for the Hamptons, as Jennifer finished packing, she got a call from Edward. Jennifer, sorry to bother you so late, but I just received an email I think you should see right away. What's wrong? She asked, concerned by his urgent tone. The Business Elite magazine is preparing a story about Richard and Montgomery Textiles. Apparently, someone sent them old documents, letters between Richard and Antonia dated 1975. Jennifer felt her heart race. How is this possible? Richard told me there were never any letters, that they lost all contact when he returned to New York City. I don't know the details, Jennifer. I just know the reporter writing the story contacted our press office asking for an official statement from the company. The story they plan to publish suggests Richard always knew about Antonia's pregnancy, but chose to ignore it for social convenience. That's absurd, Jennifer exclaimed, outraged. Who could have sent these supposed documents? I'm not sure, but the timing is suspicious. Right now, just as Richard announced his partial retirement and the company's restructuring, Jennifer took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. Edward, can you forward that email to me? I need to see exactly what they're claiming. Already sent it. And Jennifer, if those letters are authentic, they completely change the narrative about your grandfather and grandmother's relationship. After hanging up, Jennifer immediately opened her email. Edward's forward contained the magazine's message and scanned copies of 3 handwritten letters, apparently written by Richard to Antonia. The first letter, dated September 1975, was a passionate declaration of longing and promises to reunite soon. The second, from November of the same year, mentioned family obstacles complicating their plans. The third, dated January 1976, was the most disturbing. My dearest Antonia, I received your letter with the news that has shaken me deeply. A child of ours, born from the most sincere love I've ever felt, should be cause for immense joy. However, circumstances prevent me from acting as my heart desires. My commitment to Eliza has already been publicly announced, and the union between our families is more than a marriage. It's a business alliance on which the future of the company I built with such effort depends. I beg your forgiveness for not being by your side at this time. I've enclosed a check I hope will help with initial expenses. I promise financial support will never be lacking for you and our child, as long as we maintain absolute discretion about the situation. With a broken heart, Richard. Jennifer felt as if the ground had opened beneath her. If that letter was authentic, it meant Richard had lied about never knowing of Antonia's pregnancy. Worse, it suggested he had consciously abandoned her grandmother and their daughter for social and economic convenience. With trembling hands, Jennifer called the only person who could clarify the situation, Mrs. Jenkins, her grandmother's old friend. Despite the late hour, the woman answered on the third ring. "Jennifer, is something wrong with little Ethan?" "No, Mrs. Jenkins. Ethan is fine. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to ask you a very important question." After briefly explaining the letters, Jennifer asked the crucial question. Did my grandmother ever mention receiving letters from Richard, especially one where he acknowledged her pregnancy? There was a long silence on the other end. "Mrs. Jenkins, are you there?" "I'm here, dear. It's just... This is so unexpected. Antonia never mentioned letters, not to me. She always..." said Richard, left promising to return, but never contacted her again. Months later, she saw his engagement announcement in the paper and realized it had just been a summer fling to him. "Are you sure? Absolutely no mention of letters or financial support?" "Jennifer, your grandmother sewed day and night to support herself and later Helen. If there had been any financial help, I would have known. We practically lived together during our first years in New York City." Mrs. Clare's answer only deepened Jennifer's confusion. If there were no letters, where had those documents come from and why now? She barely slept that night, deciding she needed to confront Richard before the article was published. The next morning, she left Ethan with the nanny and drove to the Montgomery mansion, even before the agreed time for their trip to the Hamptons. She found Richard in his office, reviewing some documents before the trip. "Jennifer, what a surprise to see you so early. Is Ethan with you?" "No, he's with the nanny. I came alone because we need to talk about something serious." Richard's expression changed immediately, sensing the gravity in Jennifer's tone. "What happened?" Jennifer placed the printed copies of the letters on the desk, watching her grandfather's reaction closely. Richard picked up the papers, put on his reading glasses, and began examining them. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock, then to something Jennifer couldn't quite decipher. A mix of confusion and indignation. "Where did you get these?" he finally asked. "The Business Elite magazine is preparing a feature on you. Someone sent them these letters, claiming you always knew about my mother, but chose to abandon her." Richard stood abruptly, walking to the window. He remained silent for several minutes, staring at the garden. "Richard," Jennifer called, her anxiety growing with each second. "I never wrote these letters," he said at last, turning to face her. "I never knew about Antonia's pregnancy until I found you. This is a fraud, a forgery." Jennifer studied Richard's expression carefully. She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Who would do this, and why? Richard returned to the desk, examining the documents again. "The signature? It's a very good imitation of mine, but not perfect. And this paper..." He pointed to the nearly invisible watermark. This specific letterhead was only used by the company starting in 1980, years after the dates on these supposed letters. Jennifer felt immense relief, a technical detail the forgers couldn't have anticipated. "We need to act fast before..." "The article is published," she said. "If we prove they're fake..." "Jennifer," Richard interrupted, taking her hands. "Before we do anything, I need you to tell me, did you believe these letters? Did you believe I could have knowingly abandoned your grandmother and your mother?" The question caught Jennifer off guard. She had spent the whole night tormented by doubts, but now looking into Richard's eyes, she realized the answer was clear. "No, I didn't believe it. No matter how convincing they seemed, something inside me said it wasn't true." Richard smiled, visibly moved. "That means more to me than any fortune or company. Your trust, Jennifer." The office door swung open abruptly, and Patricia walked in without knocking. "Uncle Richard, I just got a call from..." She stopped when she saw Jennifer, then glanced at the letters scattered on the desk. "I see you already know." "You knew about these fake letters?" Richard asked, his tone colder than Jennifer had ever heard, almost threatening. Patricia looked genuinely confused. "Fake? What are you talking about?" The PR team called me about a Business Elite article. Someone forged letters supposedly written by me to Antonia in 1975 and 76, Richard explained. Letters claiming I knew about her pregnancy and chose to abandon her. Patricia stepped closer to the desk, examining the documents. That's outrageous. Who would do such a thing? Someone who wants to damage Richard's reputation, just as he's restructuring the company, Jennifer replied, and maybe damage my relationship with him in the process. The three exchanged glances, the same question hanging in the air. Who? We need Edward's help, said Patricia, picking up the phone. He'll know how to handle the press, and we also need a historical documents expert who can officially certify that these letters are forgeries. While Patricia made the necessary calls, Jennifer observed how the situation had unexpectedly brought the three of them together. The same niece who months earlier had tried to sabotage her presentation was now fervently working to protect not only Richard's reputation, but also the integrity of Jennifer's family history. In the hours that followed, a plan was put together. Edward contacted the magazine requesting that the article's publication be delayed until they could present proof of the forgery. At the same time, a document expert was called in to examine the original letters, which the magazine agreed to provide under the threat of legal action. What about the Hamptons? Patricia asked, once the immediate arrangements were settled. Should we postpone the trip? Richard looked at Jennifer before answering. I think we need this family time now more than ever. Let's stick to the original plan. Edward can coordinate everything from here and keep us updated. Jennifer agreed. As unsettling as the forged letters were, she wouldn't let it interfere with Ethan's first Christmas celebration with his great-grandfather. When she returned to pick up Ethan and their bags, she found her son excited and eager. You took so long, Mom, I thought you forgot we're going to the beach today. Jennifer smiled, momentarily pushing her worries aside. How could I forget? It's all you've talked about for weeks. On the way to the Hamptons, riding in the comfortable Montgomery family car, Jennifer tried to focus only on the present. Ethan chatted animatedly with the driver, asking about every detail of the beach house. The Montgomery mansion in the Hamptons exceeded all of Jennifer's expectations. Located in an exclusive area, the property looked like something out of a movie. Direct ocean views, an infinity pool, a tennis court, and lush gardens. Wow, Mom, it's like a hotel, Ethan exclaimed, his eyes wide with amazement. Charles and Mary Edwards were already there when they arrived, greeting them with warm smiles. Despite the tense situation with the forged letters, everyone seemed determined not to let it affect the family gathering. Ethan, I'll show you the best hiding spots from when I was a kid, Charles offered, much to the boys' delight. While the men took Ethan on a tour of the property, Mary Edwards led Jennifer to the room where she and her son would be staying, a spacious suite with a balcony overlooking the ocean. It's beautiful, Jennifer remarked, genuinely impressed. This was Eliza's favorite room, Mary Edwards said. She loved waking up to the sunrise over the ocean. Jennifer caught the unspoken message. There was a special meaning in placing her in that particular room. Mary Edwards, if you'd prefer we stay in another room. No. Richard insisted you stay here, and I agree. Eliza would have liked you know. The statement surprised Jennifer. Even though I'm the granddaughter of your husband's former love? Mary Edwards finished with a small smile. Eliza wasn't the type to hold grudges. She knew Richard had a past before, her just as she had hers. What mattered was the love they built together. Mary Edwards' words revealed a view of Eliza very different from what Jennifer had imagined. Not a jealous wife who would have driven Antonia out of Richard's life, but a mature woman who understood the complexities of the human heart. What do you think she would have thought about all this? About me, Ethan, our sudden entry into the family? Mary Edwards reflected for a moment. I think she would have been sad that Richard missed the chance to know Helen, but she'd be happy. He found you and Ethan now. Eliza always said families are like patchwork quilts, made of different pieces that together create something beautiful and unique. That honest conversation created a genuine bond between the two women. Jennifer understood that Mary Edwards wasn't just Charles's wife or Patricia's mother. She was the guardian of the Montgomery family's memories and traditions, the link between the past and present. That evening's dinner was more relaxed than Jennifer had expected. Ethan charmed everyone with his school stories and his innocent observations about the mansion. "Great-grandpa, your bathroom is bigger than our living room." Patricia arrived shortly after, bringing news about the magazine's developments. The expert confirmed what we already suspected. The letters are forgeries. The paper is modern, chemically treated to look old, and the ink, when analyzed, revealed components that only started being used in the 90s. "But who would do such a thing?" asked Charles, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Patricia hesitated, exchanging a glance with Richard. "The magazine agreed to reveal their source, provided we don't sue them," she explained. "It was Mark Thompson, the journalist you introduced me to months ago," Jennifer asked, surprised. "Yes," Patricia confirmed, visibly uncomfortable. "But he didn't act alone. He was hired by Robert Harrison." The silence that followed was heavy. Robert Harrison was the owner of Harrison Fabrics, Montgomery Textile's main competitor for decades. The rivalry between the two companies was legendary in the industry. "The father of the boy who fought with Ethan at school," Jennifer murmured, connecting the dots. "Exactly," Patricia said. "Apparently, Harrison saw the long-lost granddaughter's story as an opportunity to destabilize Montgomery Textiles right during the leadership transition. If he could tarnish Richard's reputation and create a rift between you and him, the company would become vulnerable," Charles finished. "With the family divided, it'd be easier for him to attempt a hostile takeover or simply gain a competitive edge." Jennifer looked at Ethan, who was oblivious to the adult conversation, building a puzzle with the housekeeper's help. "Using a child to spread rumors," she said, indignant. "What kind of person does that?" "The same kind who forges documents and tries to destroy reputations," Richard replied bitterly. "Robert has always been obsessed with outdoing me, ever. Since we were young businessmen starting in the textile industry, but this time he's gone too far." "What will we do?" Mary Edwards asked. "Nothing," Richard declared, surprising everyone, "at least for now. It's the holiday season, a time for family. Robert can wait until January for the response he deserves." Richard's decision to focus on family rather than immediate retaliation impressed Jennifer. It was a clear sign of how his priorities had changed since discovering the existence of his granddaughter and great-grandson. The following days in the Hamptons were filled with family activities Jennifer had never imagined experiencing. Ethan learned to play tennis with Charles, built elaborate sandcastles with Patricia, and spent hours in the pool under Mary Edwards' watchful eye, who discovered an unexpected knack for being a stand-in grandmother. On a particularly sunny afternoon, while everyone rested after lunch, Richard invited Jennifer for a walk along the beach. "There's something I want to show you," he said, guiding her to a small natural cove partially hidden by rocks. "It's beautiful," Jennifer remarked, admiring the crystal-clear water and nearly untouched sand. "This is where I last saw Antonia before she left the Appalachian Mountains," Richard revealed to Jennifer's surprise. "Not literally, of course, but this place always reminded me of her. The natural simplicity, the unadorned beauty. When Eliza and I bought this property, it was this little corner that won me over completely." Jennifer felt a lump in her throat. The idea that Richard had carried Antonia's memory all those years, even without knowing the fruit of that love, was deeply moving. "Did Eliza know?" "About Antonia? Yes, from the beginning. I never kept secrets from my wife. Eliza knew there had been a great love before her, though she didn't know all the details." "And it never bothered her?" Richard smiled, lost in memories. "Eliza had an extraordinary ability to understand the human heart. She used to say that loving someone doesn't mean erasing their past, but building a future together. She was the one who encouraged me to look for Antonia years later, when our finances were stable. But it was too late. You had disappeared." Jennifer tried to imagine what her life might have been like if Richard had found Antonia back then. Would her mother Helen have met her father? Could the illness that took her so young have been treated with better resources? Would Ethan have been born into a completely different world? "We can't change the past," Richard said, as if reading her thoughts. "But we can honor it while building a better future." That's what I told Mary Edwards when she visited me at the office before her trip. "You two are more alike than you think," Richard commented. "Strong, determined women who put family above all else." Jennifer smiled, accepting the compliment. It was true, despite their different backgrounds and life experiences, she and Mary Edwards shared core values. "There's something else I want to tell you, Jennifer. Something I decided recently but was waiting for the right moment." Richard's serious tone caught her attention. "I'm rewriting my will. As you know, most of my shares in the company have always been intended for Charles, with a smaller portion for Patricia. That won't change. Charles has dedicated his life to Montgomery Textiles, just like Patricia." Jennifer nodded, relieved. She had never expected or wanted to be part of the company's inheritance. "However," Richard continued, "I'm creating a specific fund for you and Ethan, not just to ensure your financial well-being, but mainly to secure the future of the Antonia Wilson Foundation. I want your grandmother's and mother's legacy to keep impacting lives long after I'm gone." "Richard, this is—" Jennifer couldn't finish, overwhelmed. "It's not just about money, Jennifer. It's about recognition. Recognition of what could have been, what should have been. Helen was my daughter, even if I never got the chance to know her. You are my granddaughter, and Ethan is my great-grandson. You are as much a part of my legacy as Charles or Patricia." They walked back to the house in silence, both processing the depth of that conversation. As they approached, they saw Ethan building an elaborate sandcastle with Charles's help, while Patricia took photos and Mary Edwards supervised, offering occasional tips. "Look, Mom, Uncle Charles said this is the best castle he's ever seen. In his life," Ethan exclaimed, his face glowing with pride. "Uncle Charles." The term had emerged naturally during the trip, just like Aunt Patricia and Grandma Mary Edwards. Terms of endearment that months earlier, Jennifer would never have imagined hearing her son say. On Christmas Eve, as everyone gathered for the traditional dinner, Jennifer observed the transformation that had taken place not only in her life, but in the lives of all those present. Ethan had gained an extended family, with male figures who could inspire and guide him. Patricia, initially so hostile, now treated Jennifer like a true cousin, sharing confidences and plans for the foundation. Charles and Mary Edwards had found in Jennifer not a threat to the family legacy, but an ally in preserving the values that had sustained the Montgomerys for decades. And Richard, the rigid and formal businessman Jennifer had met at graduation, had given way to a loving grandfather and a playful great-grandfather who spent hours telling stories to Ethan and sharing knowledge with Jennifer. After dinner, as everyone exchanged gifts around the decorated tree, Richard handed Jennifer a small box. "This was supposed to be given only tomorrow, but I don't think I can wait," he said, with a childlike sparkle in his eyes. Jennifer opened the box and found a framed document, the official registration certificate of the Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation, with its own assets and independent of Montgomery Textiles. "Now the name is complete," Richard explained. "Mother and daughter together, as it always should have been." Tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes. It was a recognition that went beyond any material value. It was the validation of her family's history, the definitive connection between past and future. Ethan, noticing his mother's emotion, approached curiously. "Why are you crying, Mom? Didn't you like the gift?" "They're tears of happiness, sweetheart," she explained, hugging him. "Sometimes we get so happy that our hearts can't contain it, and the joy spills out through our eyes." The boy considered the explanation for a moment, with the seriousness typical of children trying to understand complex emotions. "Like when I got my new bike and wanted to laugh and cry at the same time." "Exactly like that," Jennifer confirmed, smiling through her tears. Ethan then turned to Richard, offering one of his carefully wrapped drawings. "This is my gift for you, Great-Grandpa." Richard opened the package with reverence, revealing a colorful drawing that showed the whole family gathered, just as they were now, around the Christmas tree, exchanging gifts. "Ethan, this is a masterpiece," Richard exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "You have the artistic talent of your great-grandmother Antonia, and your grandmother Helen." "And my mom too," the boy added proudly. "No doubt," Richard agreed, hugging his great-grandson. "We have a lineage of talented artists in this family." In this family. The words echoed in Jennifer's heart. Since her mother's passing, when she was just 19, she had felt somehow incomplete, like a tree without deep roots. She had raised Ethan with all the love in the world, but always with the sharp awareness of what was missing: the family support system, the feeling of belonging to something greater than herself. Now, watching her son playing with Charles, exchanging gifts with Patricia, being spoiled by Mary Edwards and adored by Richard, Jennifer understood that life had given her back, in an unexpected and almost miraculous way, what had been denied to her for so long: a complete family. Days later, when they returned to New York City, the article in Business Elite magazine had taken a completely different turn from what was originally planned. Instead of a scandal about forged letters, the publication featured a story about the Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation and its role in preserving American craftsmanship. Robert Harrison, the competitor who had orchestrated the attempted defamation, received his response not through a lawsuit or business retaliation, but in a far more elegant manner. Montgomery Textiles announced a significant expansion with new factories in the Northeast focused on sustainable production and valuing local labor. Precisely the market Harrison Fabrics had been trying unsuccessfully to conquer. The strategy, developed jointly by Charles, Patricia, and Jennifer, represented not only a business victory, but also a public declaration that the new generation of the Montgomerys was united and stronger than ever. One January afternoon, Richard called Jennifer into his office at the mansion. On the desk was an old photo album she had never seen before. "I found this in the attic during the renovation," he explained. "These are photos from the Appalachian Mountains from 1975. Jennifer opened the album with reverent care. There were images of her grandmother Antonia, young and smiling, teaching weaving techniques to a much younger Richard. There were photos of the small town, the surrounding mountains, the local craft fairs. "You kept these all this time?" "I did. Even after marrying Eliza, even after building my life here, I could never part with these memories. They were too precious." Jennifer turned the pages slowly, absorbing every detail. On the last page, she found something that took her breath away: a photo of Antonia alone, gazing at the horizon with a serene expression. Clipped to the photo with an old paperclip was a small pencil sketch, the same pattern as the bird brooch that both Jennifer and Richard treasured. "It was the first sketch of the brooch," Richard explained. "Antonia drew it while we were talking about the local birds. She said the sparrow symbolized our story, a free spirit that always returns home no matter how far it flies." Jennifer traced the small drawing, feeling an almost tangible connection to her grandmother. "I'd like you to have the album," Richard said. "These are your roots, your history." "Our history," Jennifer corrected with a smile. That night, as she showed the album to Ethan, Jennifer realized she wasn't just passing down old photographs. She was sharing a narrative of identity, belonging, and redemption. The story of the humiliated seamstress who discovered she was the granddaughter of a businessman wasn't just about social ascension or unexpected twists. It was, at its core, about how love, even interrupted by life's circumstances, had the power to echo through generations, creating connections that transcended time and space. 2 years had passed since that first graduation, where Jennifer had been publicly humiliated. The Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation had grown exponentially, supporting young talents across the country. The Seamstresses Cooperative, now under Margaret Stevens' coordination and the foundation's technical supervision, had become a national success story in fair trade economics. Jennifer, now the creative director of Montgomery Textiles after Edward's retirement, balanced her corporate responsibilities with her role at the foundation and, above all, with raising Ethan. On a spring afternoon, she returned to the same technical school where it had all begun, this time not as the student who cleaned classrooms at night, but as a guest speaker on entrepreneurship and textile design. As she stepped onto the auditorium stage, she felt a slight tremble in her legs. the same space where she had been humiliated years before. But when she looked out at the audience and saw the attentive faces of the young students, many of them foundation scholars, all her nervousness melted away. "My story began here in these very classrooms," she began. "Like many of you, I worked to pay for my education." She cleaned the classrooms after lessons, studied during breaks, fought for every grade, for every opportunity. Jennifer paused, recalling the journey she'd taken. "There were difficult moments, times when I thought about giving up, but something inside me, something my grandmother Antonia and my mother Helen had planted, told me to keep going. And I'm here today to tell you that persistence pays off, not just in material or professional results, but in what we discover about ourselves along the way." In the front row, Richard watched with unmistakable pride. Beside him, Ethan, now nearly 10 years old, sketched intently in his notebook, another talent of the Wilson Montgomery family taking shape. "Each of you carries a unique story," Jennifer continued. "Roots you may not yet fully know, potential still waiting to unfold. But always remember, your worth isn't defined by your social background, what you own, or the obstacles you face. It's defined by your ability to persist, to turn hardships into stepping stones, to hold on to dignity even in the toughest moments." After the lecture, as she spoke with students, Jennifer noticed a young woman who seemed especially hesitant to approach. When she finally mustered the courage, the girl confessed, "Mrs. Wilson, I relate so much to your story. I also clean offices to pay for my classes. Sometimes I feel ashamed when my classmates find out." Jennifer smiled empathetically, recognizing in that young woman the same vulnerability she'd felt years ago. Never be ashamed of honest work, no matter what it is. Every effort shapes us. Every sacrifice prepares us for future challenges. You're not just a student who cleans offices, you're a warrior building your future brick by brick. As she left the auditorium, hand in hand with Ethan and accompanied by Richard, Jennifer glanced back one last time. The circle was complete. The place of her deepest humiliation had become the stage of her greatest triumph, not a victory of revenge or superiority, but of reconciliation and transformation. "Are you okay, Mum?" Ethan asked, noticing her brief hesitation. "Couldn't be better, sweetheart," she replied, squeezing his hand tenderly. "Just grateful for everything we've been through. Grandma Antonia and Grandma Helen would be proud, right?" the boy asked with the surprising wisdom he sometimes showed. "So proud," Jennifer confirmed, exchanging an emotional glance with Richard. "Of all of us." As they walked to the car, Jennifer reflected on the extraordinary twists life had given her. From the humiliated young woman at graduation to the respected businesswoman, from the desperate single mother to the matriarch of a reunited family, from the seamstress struggling to survive to the creative director transforming lives. But beyond all these external changes, there was the inner journey, the realization that true worth wasn't in titles, money, or social recognition, but in the ability to hold on to dignity, compassion, and generosity even through the hardest trials. Ethan let go of her hand to run ahead, excited by the promise of ice cream before heading home. Richard walked beside her, now leaning lightly on a cane, a gentle reminder that time passes for everyone, regardless of wealth or status. "You know, Jennifer," he remarked, watching Ethan play in the distance, "when I think about everything that's happened, I can't help but see destiny's hand at work, as if somehow Antonia was orchestrating our reunion from the other side." Jennifer smiled, instinctively touching the bird brooch she always wore. "May our paths always cross again," she quoted, remembering the inscription on the brooch. Her grandmother had made so many years before. Maybe she somehow knew the story wasn't over. Richard nodded, moved. "Families are like those bird brooches," he reflected. "They may separate due to life's circumstances, fly far, away for decades, but something always pulls them back home to their roots." Jennifer contemplated that image for a moment, the sparrow that always returns, no matter how far it has flown. It was the perfect metaphor for her own journey of discovery, loss, and reunion. That night, as she tucked Ethan into bed, the boy surprised her with a question. "Mom, do you think I'll ever meet my dad?" Jennifer hesitated. It was a question she had expected for years but had never prepared a perfect answer for. "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes people come into our lives only for a short time, but they leave marks forever. Your father gave me the greatest gift I've ever received, you. Even if he never comes back, that gift remains." Ethan seemed satisfied with the answer. There was no resentment in his young heart, only natural curiosity. "It's okay. I have great-grandpa. Richard, Uncle Charles, and everyone else now." The simplicity with which Ethan accepted his unconventional family touched Jennifer deeply. To a child, family wasn't defined by blood ties or social conventions, but by love, presence, and genuine care. When Ethan finally fell asleep, Jennifer sat on the balcony of the apartment they now shared, a comfortable, elegant space in the same neighborhood where Richard lived, allowing for frequent visits and close companionship without compromising the independence Jennifer valued so much. Gazing at the lights of New York City, so different from the stars her grandmother Antonia had admired decades ago in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, Jennifer felt a strange sense of wholeness. The circle that had begun with Antonia and Richard that distant summer had finally closed, not with a return to the past, but with a redemption that had transformed abandonment into reunion, humiliation into recognition, and loneliness into belonging. The seamstress, once humiliated at graduation, had found not just professional success or material comfort, but something far more precious and rare: reconciliation with her own history, the healing of ancestral wounds she hadn't even known she carried. And in that healing, she had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that a person's true worth isn't in the surname they bear, the bank account they hold, or the position they occupy, but in their ability to face adversity with dignity, to turn pain into compassion, abandonment into acceptance, and tragedy into redemption. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us tremendously as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On a spring morning, 5 years after that fateful graduation, Jennifer received an unexpected email. The sender was a name she never imagined she'd see again: Andrew Foster, Ethan's father. With trembling hands, she opened the message. "Dear Jennifer, I know I have no right to reach out after so many years of absence. I don't seek to justify the unjustifiable. I abandoned you and our son when you needed me most, and there are no excuses for that. Recently, while passing by a bookstore, I saw your name on the cover of a magazine about women entrepreneurs. The article mentioned your incredible journey, the Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation, and your work at Montgomery Textiles. I was genuinely happy to see how you've thrived despite all the hardships, many of which I placed in your path myself. I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I have any expectations of being part of your lives. I just felt the need to say I deeply regret the cowardly man I was. If Ethan ever asks about me, just tell him his father finally understood the unforgivable, a mistake he made. I wish you all the happiness, Andrew." Jennifer read and reread the message, conflicting emotions stirring inside her. Anger at the abandonment that had caused her so much pain. Relief to know he was okay. Resentment at the belated contact. Curiosity about his current circumstances. She decided not to respond right away. She needed time to process this unexpected bridge to the past. That evening, she shared the email with Richard during a family dinner. Now 78 years old and physically frailer, he still had the same sharp mind and wisdom that had always defined him. "What do you plan to do?" he asked after listening carefully. "Honestly, I don't know." Ethan is 12 now. He's been asking more and more questions about his father, especially since spending time with friends who have traditional families. "He has a right to know his roots," Richard remarked gently. "I, more than anyone, understand what it means to discover family ties late in life." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. "I'm afraid of the disappointment. Andrew isn't you, Richard. He's not a loving grandfather reunited by chance. He's a man who knowingly abandoned his baby son. And yet he's part of Ethan's story. Just like Antonia was part of mine, even when I didn't know about Helen." Richard's wisdom, tempered by years and his own experience of late family reunion, gave Jennifer a valuable perspective. This wasn't about forgiving Andrew or reintegrating him into the family. It was about allowing Ethan access to that part of his identity, if he ever wanted it. Days later, she finally replied to the email. "Andrew, thank you for reaching out. Ethan is doing well, growing up healthy and happy. He's developed a talent for drawing and music and has a large, loving family around him. I hold no grudges about the past. Life took paths I never imagined, and I'm grateful for where we are today. If Ethan ever shows interest in meeting you, I'll let him make that decision when he's old enough to understand the complex circumstances involved. I hope you found peace, Jennifer." The message was brief, without excessive emotion or blame. It simply acknowledged reality and left open a future possibility, without promises or expectations. The following week, during a strategic planning session for the foundation, Patricia presented an ambitious proposal. "I believe it's time we expand internationally," she explained, ever the business visionary. "We've received invitations to showcase our model for supporting traditional craftsmanship at sustainable fashion fairs in Europe." Jennifer considered the idea. The foundation had grown steadily over the years, impacting thousands of lives across the country. International expansion would mean greater visibility for American artisanal techniques and new opportunities for the craftspeople supported by the project. "We could start with a traveling exhibition," she suggested. "We'd select representative pieces from different regions, telling the story behind each technique and the artisans preserving them." Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Paris would be the ideal starting point. I have contacts at Fashion Week who could open doors for us." The international exhibition project quickly took shape. American Hands, Tradition and Innovation would celebrate the country's textile craftsmanship, with a special focus on techniques preserved and reinvented by women in traditional communities. Amid the preparations for the exhibition, Ethan came home from school one day with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love. What is it?" "In class today, the teacher asked us to make a family tree. Do I need to include him?" Jennifer knew exactly who Ethan was referring to. This was the moment she had both feared and anticipated. "Yes, Ethan, your biological father is part of your family tree, even if he hasn't been present in your life. His name is Andrew Foster." Ethan carefully wrote the name in his notebook. "Is he alive?" "Yes, he is." "Does he know about me?" "He always has. And recently he reached out to me. He said he saw an article about my work and was happy to hear we were doing well." The boy's eyes widened. "He wrote to you? When? Why?" Jennifer sat beside her son, choosing her words carefully. "A few weeks ago. I think he felt the need to acknowledge the mistakes he made by leaving us. He didn't ask for anything, just expressed regret." Ethan stayed silent for a few minutes, processing the information. "Did you reply?" "Yes, I told him you're doing well, growing up healthy and happy, surrounded by people who love you." "Does he want to meet me?" The question Jennifer dreaded most. He didn't ask outright, but if one day you're interested in meeting him, when you're older and can better understand the situation, that door isn't closed. Ethan nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer for now. Jennifer knew this wouldn't be the last conversation about it, but she felt relieved to have started the dialogue honestly and in a way suited to her son's age. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the Paris exhibition completely absorbed Jennifer's attention. Selecting the pieces, organizing logistics, crafting the narrative for each item, everything needed to reflect not just the aesthetic beauty of American craftsmanship, but also its cultural and historical significance. One piece posed a special challenge, the bird brooch that connected her grandmother Antonia's story to Richard. Jennifer wanted to include it in the exhibition, but the piece held immense sentimental value for both of them. "Use mine," Richard offered when she mentioned the dilemma. "I'm sure Antonia would have loved to see her work appreciated internationally. Are you sure? It's one of the few tangible memories you have of her. That's exactly why it should be shared. Antonia's story, like Helen's, deserves to be known beyond our private memories." Richard's generosity moved Jennifer deeply. At 78, he showed an increasing willingness to let go of control and material possessions, prioritizing instead the intangible legacy he would leave behind. The week before leaving for Paris was a whirlwind of activity. Jennifer split her time between finalizing the exhibition, her responsibilities at Montgomery Textiles, and preparing Ethan to stay with Mary Edwards while she was away. "Promise you'll call every day?" the boy asked the night before her trip. "I promise, my love. It's only 2 weeks and Grandma Mary Edwards has already planned a whole schedule of fun activities for you." Ethan smiled, but Jennifer noticed a shadow in his eyes, something beyond just sadness about their temporary separation. "Is something bothering you, Ethan?" The boy hesitated before answering. "I've been thinking about my dad. If one day I want to meet him, how would we do it?" The question caught Jennifer off guard. Ethan had never shown such direct interest before. "Well, I have his email. If and when you feel ready, we can reach out." "What if he doesn't want to meet me?" The fear in her son's voice broke Jennifer's heart. "Ethan, look at me," she said, holding his hands. "Your father expressed regret for not being part of your life. I'm sure he'd be honored to meet you when you're ready. But regardless of his decision, you have a huge family that loves you unconditionally. Great-grandfather Richard, Uncle Charles, and Aunt Mary Edwards, Aunt Patricia, they all adore you for the incredible boy you are." Ethan nodded, seeming a bit more at ease. "Can we think about this when you get back from Paris?" "Of course, my love. We'll have all the time in the world to decide the best path together." At the airport. The next morning, the entire family came to say goodbye. Richard, leaning on his cane, gave his typical worried grandfather advice. "Don't forget to call as soon as you arrive, and watch out for pickpockets in Montmartre. Paris is beautiful, but it has its dangers." Patricia, who would be traveling with Jennifer, rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Uncle Richard, we're grown, successful women, not teenagers on a school trip. To me, you'll always be my girls," he replied with a warm smile that included both his niece and granddaughter. The exhibition, American Hands, Tradition and Innovation, in Paris, was a success beyond even the most optimistic expectations. Critics, designers, and international curators were impressed by the richness of American craftsmanship presented through a contemporary lens. The bird brooch created by Antonia received special attention, with its story highlighted in fashion and design publications. One evening after an event, Jennifer and Patricia enjoyed a glass of wine at a cafe near their hotel, celebrating the exhibition's success. "I knew we'd be an unbeatable team," Patricia remarked, raising her glass in a toast. "My strategic side, your creative side, we're the perfect balance." Jennifer smiled, savoring the wine. Who would have thought 5 years ago that she and Patricia would become not just effective professional partners, but true friends? If someone had told me at graduation that one day we'd be in Paris together, representing a family foundation, I would have thought it was completely absurd. And if someone had told me I'd have a cousin I deeply admire, and a second cousin I love like a nephew, Patricia added sincerely. Jennifer's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Mary Edwards. "Jennifer, I'm sorry to call so late, but something happened that you need to know right away." The urgent tone alarmed Jennifer. "What's wrong? Is Ethan okay?" "Ethan's fine, don't worry, but Richard, he had another heart episode. He's in the hospital now. The doctors say he's stable, but we're coming back on the first available flight," Jennifer decided immediately, exchanging a worried glance with Patricia, who had already grasped the situation from the tone of the conversation. "He insisted you not cut your trip short," Mary Edwards continued. "He said the exhibition is more important than a stubborn old man with heart problems," his exact words. "Typical of him," Jennifer said with a sad smile. "But we're not taking any chances. We'll arrange everything here and come back as soon as possible." After the call, Patricia was already on the phone with her assistant, booking emergency flights back to the US. "I got us 2 tickets for early tomorrow," she informed Jennifer. "We can let the team handle the last days of the exhibition. The most important thing now is being with Uncle Richard." The next morning, as they prepared to leave, Jennifer received an unexpected email. It was from Andrew, Ethan's father. "Jennifer, thank you for your kind response to my earlier message. I know I don't deserve your courtesy after everything I did or failed to do. I'm writing because I heard through a colleague in the textile industry about the exhibition in Paris. News of your work has even reached me here in Boston, where I live now. I don't know if Ethan has asked about me or if you've ever mentioned my existence to him. If one day he shows interest in meeting his biological father, please know I'll be open to that encounter, under whatever terms and conditions you deem appropriate. I'm not asking for anything, just offering this possibility in case it ever makes sense to you. Wishing you an excellent exhibition in Paris, Andrew. The timing of the email, arriving just as they were returning to the US due to Richard's health, felt like some kind of cosmic sign Jennifer couldn't fully interpret. She decided not to reply immediately. Her absolute priority now was getting back to be by Richard's side. During the long flight home, Jennifer reflected on how her life had completely transformed over the past 5 years. From the humiliated young woman at graduation to a business owner and director of an internationally recognized foundation. From a desperate single mother to the matriarch of a restructured family. And now, with Andrew's reappearance, the past was knocking at her door once again, asking for reconciliation and closure. When they landed in New York City, they went straight to the hospital. They found Richard conscious, but visibly frailer than when they'd left for Paris a week earlier. "What a waste of a wonderful trip," he scolded weakly with a faint smile. "You should have stayed to enjoy Paris. And missed the chance to lecture you for not following the doctor's orders?" "Never," Patricia teased, leaning in to kiss her uncle's forehead. "How's your heart, Richard?" Jennifer asked, tenderly holding her grandfather's hand. "Tired but stubborn," he replied, "just like its owner." The doctors had been clear. This second cardiac episode, though not as severe as the first, meant Richard would need to further reduce his activities and follow a strict regimen of medication and rest. "I'm not ready to go yet," he declared when they were alone. "I have a great-grandson to watch grow, a granddaughter to see shine internationally, and a foundation to see flourish." Jennifer squeezed his hand, moved. "And we'll do all of that together for many more years." In the following days, as Richard recovered at home under medical care, Jennifer finally told Ethan about Andrew's new contact. "He said he'd be willing to meet you, if you ever want to," she explained, watching her son's reaction closely. Ethan stayed silent for a moment, processing the information. "What about you, Mom? Do you want me to meet him?" The question was complex, loaded with emotions Jennifer had tried to sort through on the flight back from Paris. "What I want, my love, is for you to have access to every part of your story when you feel ready. Andrew is your biological father, and that's a fact that will never change. Whether or not you meet him is your decision, one I'll respect and support, no matter what." Ethan seemed satisfied with her answer. He went back to his homework, but Jennifer knew the seed had been planted. Sooner or later, her son would decide whether he wanted to meet the man who had fathered and then abandoned him. 3 months later, with Richard fully recovered and the foundation celebrating the international success of the exhibition, Ethan finally made his choice. "Mom, I think I'd like to meet my dad," he announced one evening at dinner. "Not to have him be part of our daily lives or anything, just to know who he is, to understand that part of my story." Jennifer nodded, respecting the maturity with which her son approached the topic. "Are you sure about this, Ethan?" "I am. Great-Grandpa Richard said something that really made me think. He told me he lost precious years by not knowing Grandma Helen, and that it's one of his biggest regrets in life. I don't want to grow up wondering what if." The wisdom in the preteen's words struck Jennifer deeply. Ethan had absorbed not only the Montgomery family's love, but also their deepest lessons about loss, regret, and reconciliation. "I'll reach out to him," Jennifer promised. "But I want you to know I can be by your side during this meeting if you'd prefer." "Thank you, Mom. I think that would be better, at least the first time." The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday at a quiet cafe in the Upper East Side. Jennifer arrived with Ethan a few minutes early, giving her son time to calm down and prepare emotionally. When Andrew entered the cafe, Jennifer recognized him immediately, despite the years that had passed. He was older, with streaks of gray at his temples, but his athletic build and hesitant smile were the same. "Hi, Jennifer," he greeted nervously. Then, looking at Ethan, he added with visible emotion, "And you must be Ethan. It's An honor to finally meet you." Ethan extended his hand politely, like the young gentleman he was becoming. "Hello, Mr. Foster. You can call me Andrew," he replied, shaking his son's hand carefully, as if afraid the boy might vanish at his touch. The initial conversation was awkward, filled with silences and hesitant attempts to find common ground. But slowly, as Ethan began asking questions, first about Andrew's profession, civil engineer, then about his family, he had 2 brothers, and finally about why he had left, a connection began to form. "I was very young and scared," Andrew explained when Ethan asked directly why he had abandoned them. "Your mother and I met in college. When she got pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father, to take on that responsibility. So I ran. It was the most cowardly and wrong decision of my life, and not a day goes by that I don't regret it." Andrew's raw honesty, without trying to justify the unjustifiable, impressed Jennifer. He had matured over the years, taking full responsibility for his actions. "Do you have other kids?" Ethan asked. "No, I never married or had other children. I think in some way I knew I didn't deserve another chance at fatherhood after what I did to you." As the meeting drew to a close after nearly 2 hours of conversation, Andrew hesitated before saying goodbye. "I know I have no right to ask this, but could we meet again someday, maybe monthly or however you'd like? I'd really love to get to know you better, Ethan, if you'll let me." Ethan looked at Jennifer, seeking guidance. She simply smiled, making it clear the decision was his. "I think so," the boy finally replied. "Maybe next month. I could show you some of my drawings." "I'd love that," Andrew answered with an emotional smile. "Thank you, Ethan, and thank you, Jennifer, for allowing this meeting." On the way home, Ethan remained thoughtful. "Are you okay, son?" Jennifer asked, concerned. "Yeah, I'm just thinking, he seems nice now, but I still don't understand how he could leave us." "People change, Ethan. Some for the better, some for the worse. Andrew seems to have learned from his mistakes and grown. That doesn't erase the past, but at least it shows he recognizes how wrong he was." Ethan nodded, processing the complexity of human relationships he was just beginning to understand. "You know what I liked the most?" he said finally. "Finding out I have his eyes. I always wondered where they came from since they're not like yours." Jennifer smiled, touched by the simple yet profound observation. For Ethan, that meeting had filled a gap in his identity, allowing him to see himself more completely. When they arrived home, they found Richard waiting for them. The great-grandfather had insisted on being present after the meeting, ready to offer emotional support if needed. "So?" he asked when Ethan ran to hug him. "How did it go?" "It was weird but cool," the boy replied. "He looks a little like me." "Or I look like him, I guess." Richard smiled, understanding the importance of that discovery. "It's good to know our roots, isn't it? Knowing where we come from helps us decide where we want to go." Ethan nodded, absorbing his great-grandfather's wisdom. "I'm gonna go draw in my room, okay?" When the boy left, Richard turned to Jennifer. "And you, my dear, how are you feeling?" Jennifer sat beside her grandfather, finally allowing herself to process her own emotions about the encounter. Confused, to be honest. 5 years ago, when Andrew abandoned us, I hated him. Now, I don't feel that anymore. I see a man who made a terrible mistake and spent years paying for it, with remorse and loneliness. Forgiveness isn't for him, Jennifer. It's for you, Richard said gently. It frees your heart from a burden you didn't need to carry. Just like you forgave Antonia for never telling you about Helen? Richard smiled sadly. There was never anything to forgive. She made the decision she believed was best at the time, with the information she had. We all do that, one way or another. Regret comes when we look back and realize it could have been different. Jennifer pondered her grandfather's words. Richard had grown emotionally as much as she had in recent years. The discovery of his granddaughter and great-grandson seemed to have opened floodgates in his heart that had been closed for decades. "You know," he continued, looking at a photo of Ethan on the table, "I've been thinking a lot about legacies lately, about what we truly leave behind when we go. I built a textile empire, accumulated material wealth, created a respected company, but none of that compares to what I gained by knowing you and Ethan. The real legacy is the bonds we create, Jennifer agreed, holding her grandfather's hand. Exactly. And now Ethan will have the chance to learn more about his history, his roots. That's a precious gift, even if it comes from an unlikely source. The following week, the Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation announced the creation of a special scholarship fund for single mothers who wanted to study textile design or artisanal techniques. The program offered not only financial support, but also mentorship, childcare during classes, and paid internship opportunities. Patricia, who co-led the project with Jennifer, explained during the press conference. This program was inspired by Jennifer's own journey, who faced so many obstacles as a single mother trying to build a career. We want to ensure other talented women don't have to clean classrooms at night to pursue their dreams. The program was an immediate success, receiving hundreds of applications in just a few days. Jennifer, while interviewing the first candidates, saw herself reflected in each of those women, determined, talented, willing to make any sacrifice for their children, yet deserving of a less arduous path than the one she had walked. On a fall afternoon nearly 6 years after that life-changing graduation, Jennifer received a special invitation. The New York Fashion Technical School would celebrate its 50th anniversary with a retrospective exhibition, and they wanted her to be the keynote speaker at the opening ceremony. "Should I accept?" she asked Richard during a Sunday family lunch. "The question, my dear, is, do you want to?" Going back to that auditorium, that stage. Jennifer thought for a moment. 6 years ago, I would have hesitated. The memory of the humiliation would still be too fresh. But now, I feel the circle will only be complete if I return as the keynote speaker, celebrated where I was once diminished. Richard smiled proudly. "Then you have your answer." On the day of the ceremony, the auditorium was packed, current. Students, alumni, professors, representatives from the textile industry and the press. In the front row, Jennifer's family was gathered. Richard, Ethan, now a tall 13-year-old for his age, Charles and Mary Edwards, Patricia, and even Andrew, who had been quietly included by Ethan in the family invitations. As she stepped onto the stage, Jennifer felt a brief chill remembering that other ceremony years before, but the moment of hesitation passed quickly. This was no longer the insecure young woman from back then, but a fulfilled, professionally respected, and emotionally whole woman. Just over 6 years ago, I stood in this very auditorium, receiving my diploma as a graduate of this program, she began. Some of you may know the story. The student who cleaned classrooms at night to pay for her studies, publicly humiliated during her own graduation. A reverent silence fell over the auditorium. It could have been the bitter end of a journey. But as life always teaches us, endings are just new beginnings in disguise. That moment of shame turned out to be the first page of a new chapter, one that led me to discover my true family, to found an institution that has already transformed thousands of lives, and to stand here today, speaking to you not as the janitor, who was ridiculed, but as the creative director of one of the country's largest textile companies. Jennifer paused, looking directly at Ethan, who watched her with evident pride. If there's one lesson I'd like to share today, it's that our worth is never determined by the moments we're diminished, but by the dignity with which we rise afterward. I am not who I am in spite of the hardships I faced. I am who I am because of them. Every obstacle overcome, every closed door that forced me to open windows, every no that inspired me to find new paths, shaped the woman, the professional, and the mother I've become. As she concluded her speech, Jennifer saw discreet tears in the eyes of many in the audience. Her story had struck deep chords, the fight for dignity, triumph over prejudice, redemption emerging from the most unexpected places. After the ceremony, during the reception, an elderly man approached timidly. "Miss Wilson, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Robert. I worked as a security guard here at the school during your graduation." Jennifer recognized him immediately, the kind guard who always greeted her when she arrived to clean the classrooms at night. "Of course I remember you, Mr. Robert, how are you?" "Fine, thank God. I just wanted to say I always knew you'd go far. I saw your dedication both in your studies and your work. And that day, that graduation day, I was so angry at the principal. I almost lost my job because I told her what I thought afterward. Jennifer smiled, moved to learn she'd had a silent defender in that painful moment. Thank you for being on my side, even if I didn't know it. You know, my granddaughter is studying here now. She heard your story and said you're her inspiration. She wants to be a designer like you one day. Those words touched Jennifer more deeply than any formal recognition. Knowing her journey had inspired another talented young woman, possibly. Facing her own obstacles was the true measure of success. As she returned to her family, Ethan hugged her tightly. You were amazing, Mom. Thank you, sweetheart. So amazing you even made Andrew cry, the boy whispered, discreetly pointing to his father, who did seem to be wiping away tears. In the months that followed, life continued its natural flow. Ethan was adapting well to adolescence, further developing his artistic talent with private lessons now sponsored by Richard. His meetings with Andrew had become more regular, not frequent enough to constitute active fatherhood, but consistent enough to establish a relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Richard, despite the physical limitations imposed by age and heart problems, remained mentally sharp and deeply involved in the Foundation's projects. His bond with Jennifer and Ethan grew stronger each day, partially filling the void left by the daughter he had never known. On a particularly pleasant spring afternoon, as they strolled through the mansion's garden, Richard made a surprising confession. You know, Jennifer, in my nearly 80 years, I've made many mistakes. I was obsessive about business, often neglectful of Charles when he was a child, and certainly not the most attentive husband to Eliza, though I loved her deeply. Jennifer listened in silence, sensing there was more to come. But I never truly knew what it meant to be a grandfather until I met you, and being a great-grandfather to Ethan, that's a blessing I never imagined I deserved. You're the best grandfather and great-grandfather we could have asked for, Richard, she replied, sincerely. Fate is curious, isn't it? I had to reach 70 to finally learn what it truly means to be family, to understand that companies, money, status, all of it is fleeting. What remains are the bonds we create, the lives we touch. Antonia would be proud of the man you've become, Jennifer remarked. Richard smiled, gazing at the horizon. I like to think she and Helen are somewhere, watching, seeing how, despite all the detours along the way, our story finally found its rightful path. That conversation stayed etched in Jennifer's memory. Weeks later, when Richard suffered a third heart attack, this one finally fatal, it was those words that brought some comfort amid the pain of loss. Richard Montgomery's funeral gathered hundreds, business leaders, politicians, celebrities, employees of Montgomery Textiles, artisans supported by the foundation. But the intimate circle around the casket was small. Charles and Mary Edwards, Patricia, Jennifer and Ethan, and a few longtime friends. During the ceremony, Charles asked Jennifer to speak, acknowledging her special place in his father's life in recent years. I knew Richard Montgomery twice, she began, her voice thick with emotion. First as the serious, formal businessman who witnessed my humiliation and offered me a professional opportunity. Then as the loving grandfather and devoted great-grandfather who filled our lives with warmth and wisdom. They were two very different men, separated by a discovery that transformed us all. Jennifer paused, looking at Ethan, who wept silently beside Charles. The most valuable lesson Richard leaves us isn't in his business empire, his fortune, or his professional legacy. It's in his capacity for change. At 70, when many are set in their ways, he had the courage to open his heart to a new family, to relearn what it truly meant to love and be loved, to recognize that it's never too late to correct fate's detours. After the funeral, the reading of the will held few surprises. As Richard had announced years earlier, the majority of his company shares went to Charles, with a significant portion for Patricia. For Jennifer and Ethan, beyond the already established fund for the foundation, Richard left the beach house in the Hamptons and a personal letter to be read only by them. My dear Jennifer and my beloved Ethan, if you're reading this letter, it means I've finally departed to reunite with Antonia and Helen. Do not mourn for me. I have lived a long life and, thanks to you, a complete one. Jennifer, meeting. You was the most precious gift I ever received in my existence. Through you, I caught a glimpse of the daughter I never knew and recognized the love that Antonia and I shared, briefly but intensely, so many decades ago. You taught me that family isn't defined by social conventions or others' expectations, but by genuine love and mutual respect. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your life and Ethan's, even after so many years of involuntary absence. Ethan, my dear great-grandson, you brought light and joy to my final years. Your artistic talent, endless curiosity, and generous heart are gifts the world will be lucky to know. Never forget your roots, all of them. We are made of the stories that came before us, but also the choices we make every day. The house in the Hamptons was always special to me. It was there that, without even realizing it, I kept Antonia's memory alive through the years. The little beach corner that reminded me of her now belongs to you, so you can continue the story that in a way began there. The Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation is our shared legacy to the world. Through it, 3 generations separated by fate finally unite in purpose. I trust you, Jennifer, to carry on this work, transforming lives as your own was transformed. Finally, I want you to know I left in peace, my heart full of gratitude for having had the chance to know and love you. Some circles take a lifetime to close, but when they finally do, they bring a sense of wholeness that makes everything, absolutely everything, worth it. With eternal love, Richard, or simply Great-Grandpa, as Ethan always called me so affectionately. Tears streamed freely down Jennifer's face as she read those words. Ethan, reading beside her, hugged her tightly. He'll stay in our hearts forever, right, Mum? Yes, sweetheart, forever. A year after Richard's passing, life had found a new balance. Charles had officially taken over as president of Montgomery Textiles, with Patricia as his executive vice president. Jennifer remained as creative director, splitting her time between the company and the foundation, which now supported young talents across the country. Ethan, now 14, divided his time between school, art classes, and alternating weekends between their home in New York City and the beach house in the Hamptons, which had become the favorite retreat for their extended family. Jennifer, Charles, and Mary Edwards, Patricia and her children, and occasionally even Andrew, who had gradually been included in family gatherings in a quiet but respected role. One particularly pleasant Sunday morning, as they had breakfast on the beach house porch, Ethan surprised everyone with an announcement. I've decided I want to study in Europe after high school. Jennifer nearly choked on her coffee. Europe? That's quite unexpected. Where did this idea come from? From the exhibition in Paris, he explained. Remember how everyone admired Great-Grandma Antonia's work? I want to study traditional craft techniques from different countries and bring that knowledge back to the foundation. It'd be like a bridge between cultures. Patricia, listening in, smiled approvingly. Exactly the kind of project the foundation should support, a cultural exchange program for young artisans. Hey, not so fast, Jennifer interrupted, laughing. He still has a few years before heading off to Europe. But the seed was planted. In the following months, Jennifer worked with Patricia to develop a formal international exchange program through the foundation, starting with France and Italy, but with plans to expand to other countries with rich textile traditions. It will be the direct legacy of Antonia and Richard, remarked Patricia during a planning meeting, the union of seemingly distant worlds through art and craftsmanship. On a fall afternoon, nearly 7 years after that fateful graduation, Jennifer returned alone to the New York Fashion Technical School. There was no official event, no lecture to deliver, just a personal need to revisit the place where it had all begun, now with a perspective transformed by time and experience. She walked quietly through the halls, remembering the night she had paced them with a mop and bucket. She stopped in front of one of the classrooms, now modernized with equipment that hadn't existed in her student days. Hello? Can I help? You? A young staff member approached, clearly not recognizing Jennifer. I'm just revisiting my old school, she explained. I studied here a few years ago. Oh, I see. Many alumni come back from time to time. It's a special place, isn't it? Jennifer smiled, thinking of how this place had represented both suffering and redemption in her story. Yes, very special. Before leaving, she made one last stop at the auditorium where her graduation had taken place. The space was empty, except for a few staff preparing for some future event. She sat in one of the audience chairs, gazing at the stage where Margaret Stevens had publicly humiliated her, and where she herself had later returned as the honored guest speaker. The place where Richard Montgomery had first seen her, setting off a chain of events that would forever alter the course of her life. One of the staff, noticing her presence, approached politely. "Excuse me, ma'am, but the auditorium is closed for preparations." "Just one more minute, please," Jennifer requested. "I'm saying goodbye." The man, sensing something meaningful in her tone, nodded respectfully and stepped away. Jennifer closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her entire journey in that quiet moment. The young woman who cleaned classrooms at night to pay for her education. The single mother abandoned, struggling to raise her son. The talented designer who had only needed a chance. The rediscovered granddaughter of a powerful businessman. The director of a foundation that transformed lives. All these versions of Jennifer coexisted within her, each bringing its own lessons and strengths. None more true than the others, all equally part of who she had become. When she opened her eyes, she felt a strange sense of closure. The circle was complete. The story that had begun with Antonia and Richard decades ago, interrupted by fate and imperfect human choices, had finally found its path through her, through Ethan, and now expanded to touch countless other lives through the foundation. She stood ready to leave, but cast one last glance at the stage. "Thank you," she murmured softly, to the empty auditorium, to Margaret Stevens, who was no longer there, to the fate that had even used humiliation as a stepping stone in her journey. As she stepped out of the school, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the campus trees. Jennifer took a deep breath, feeling a profound peace. Her phone rang. It was Ethan, reminding her about the family dinner that night to celebrate Mary Edwards' birthday. Walking to her car, Jennifer smiled, thinking of the unlikely and wonderful family fate had woven around her. A family born of pain and redemption, of loss and reunion, of imperfect choices and second chances. The seamstress, humiliated at graduation, had found not just professional success, recognition, or material comfort. She had found something infinitely more precious. The peace of knowing her worth had never depended on others' approval, but on the integrity with which she faced every challenge life presented. 5 years later, the Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation had become an international reference for preserving and innovating artisanal techniques. The cultural exchange program for young artisans, inspired by Ethan's idea, had already benefited over 100 talents from underprivileged communities across the US, sending them to study in Europe and bringing traditional techniques from other countries to be incorporated into American craftsmanship. Ethan, now 19, had just been accepted into a prestigious design school in Milan. Tall, with features reminiscent of both Jennifer and Andrew, he had grown into a confident and talented young man with a unique artistic vision that blended the sensitivity inherited from Antonia with the technical precision characteristic of the Montgomerys. "I still can't believe I'll be living in Italy in 2 weeks," he remarked as he dined with Jennifer at their beach house in the Hamptons, now his favorite retreat for important moments. "Your great-grandfather would be so proud," Jennifer replied with a nostalgic smile. "He always said you had the soul of an artist and the mind of a visionary." Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "Sometimes I feel like he's still here, you know, especially in this house. Like he could appear any moment to show me another book on art history or tell me a story from his youth." Jennifer understood that feeling perfectly. Even after 5 years, Richard's presence was almost tangible in certain places and moments, not as a painful absence, but as a warm energy that lived on through shared memories and lessons. "Life's funny, isn't it, Mom?" Ethan mused, gazing out the window at the ocean. "If the principal hadn't humiliated you at that graduation, if Great-Grandpa hadn't been there that day, if everything had been different, we wouldn't be here," Jennifer finished. "That's why I never judge hardships when they come. They might just be doors to places we can't see yet." The philosophy Jennifer had developed over the years wasn't born from books or abstract theories, but from lived experience. The falls and fresh starts, the tears and smiles that had shaped her journey. "Andrew called today," Ethan mentioned, changing the subject. "He wanted details about my move to Milan, offered help if I need anything in Europe." The relationship between Ethan and his biological father had slowly evolved over the years. They never became exceptionally close, but built a respectful and affectionate bond, rooted in mutual acceptance of their shared yet separate histories. "He cares about you," Jennifer replied without resentment. Time had softened the edges of that difficult story. "It's good you could build a relationship, even if it's not conventional. I think we've all learned that family goes way beyond conventional, right?" Ethan said with a knowing smile. Jennifer smiled, thinking of the extraordinary family they'd built over the years. Charles and Mary Edwards, who had become loving uncle and aunt to Ethan. Patricia, who had transformed from a rival into a confidant and partner. Andrew, the absent father who had found his place as a distant but steady support. And the ever-present memory of Richard, Antonia, and Helen, 3 generations that in some mysterious way had orchestrated their reunion across time. The next morning, Jennifer had an important meeting at the foundation. A major event was being planned to celebrate the institution's 10th anniversary, a decade of transforming lives through art and craftsmanship. "Jennifer, we finally confirmed the Secretary of Culture's attendance," Patricia announced excitedly as she walked into the meeting room. At 45, she maintained the same energy and determination as always, though her style had softened considerably over the years. "Excellent. And what about that idea to honor pioneering artisans from different parts of the country? We've already identified 5 extraordinary women, all over 80, who kept alive techniques that were on the verge of disappearing. We're arranging not only to bring them to the ceremony, but also to document their stories in a book." Jennifer felt deep satisfaction. The foundation had become exactly what she and Richard had dreamed of, a bridge between past and future, preserving traditions while opening doors to innovation. "Patricia," Jennifer began, her tone more personal, "have you ever thought about how much our lives have changed in these 12 years? Since that day you introduced me to a journalist trying to expose my humble origins." Patricia laughed, shaking her head at the memory of those early days of rivalry. "God, I was unbearable. How did you not strangle me back then?" "Maybe because deep down, I saw a little of myself in you," Jennifer replied honestly. "That fierce determination, the need to prove your worth, to carve out your place. The difference is I was born with everything and still felt insecure. You built everything from scratch and still kept your humanity." The bond that had formed between the 2 women was one of the most surprising and rewarding outcomes of their entire journey. From rivals to partners, from distrust to genuine friendship, an evolution that reflected the growth of both. After the meeting, Jennifer received an unexpected call. It was Mrs. Jenkins, her grandmother's old friend, now nearly 90. "Jennifer, my dear, I'm calling because I found something that belonged to your grandmother, Antonia. It's been tucked away among my things for years, and only now, while sorting through some old trunks to move to my daughter's house, did I realize I never gave it to you." "What is it, Mrs. Jenkins?" "A diary, a small notebook, where Antonia wrote her thoughts during Helen's pregnancy and the girl's early years. I thought you might like to have it." Jennifer's heart raced. An unknown piece of her grandmother and mother's history, preserved all these years. It felt like receiving a precious gift from the past. "Can I come get it today?" Hours later, sitting alone in her New York City home office, Jennifer reverently opened the small, worn notebook. Antonia's careful, elegant handwriting filled the yellowed pages. She began reading the first entry, dated January 1976. "Today I confirmed what I've suspected for weeks. I'm expecting Richard's child. A life grows inside me, born of the truest love I've ever known. I should be frightened. I'm a woman alone with no means, in a time when single mothers are judged without mercy. But inside me there's only gratitude. This baby is proof our love was real, however brief. Richard left 2 months ago, promising to return. I don't know if he'll keep his word. The papers speak of his engagement to a society girl from New York City. Perhaps it was just a summer dream to him, while for me it was the love of a lifetime. I feel no anger or bitterness, only a quiet certainty. This child will be loved enough by me to make up for any absence. And one day, perhaps, the paths that now divide may cross again. Tears streamed freely down Jennifer's face as she read those words, written decades earlier. Antonia's serene wisdom, her ability to love without conditions or expectations, touched her granddaughter's heart deeply. She kept reading in the days that followed, absorbing each entry like a treasure. Antonia documented the pregnancy, Helen's birth, the girl's first steps and words. There were mentions of difficult times, financial struggles, prejudice for being a single mother, the fight to build a dignified life far from her homeland. But a feeling of gratitude and hope prevailed, one that Jennifer recognized as the same strength that had always sustained her in the most challenging moments. In one of the last entries, dated on Helen's 5th birthday, Antonia had written, "Helen asked about her father today. I told her he was a good man who had to follow a different path. I didn't mention the bird brooch about our promise that our paths would cross again someday. Some truths are seeds that must wait for the right time to sprout. Maybe Helen will never know her father. Maybe I'll never see Richard again. But something inside me, the same intuition that has guided me all my life, tells me this story isn't over yet. That true love, even when interrupted, leaves marks that time cannot erase. So I keep the brooch, raise my daughter with all the love in the world, and trust that somehow, someday, the circle will close. If not for me, perhaps for Helen. If not for Helen, maybe for her children or grandchildren. True love is patient. It knows how to wait." Jennifer closed the diary, feeling deeply connected to her grandmother through those prophetic words. Antonia had somehow foreseen what would happen decades later. The circle had indeed closed, not for her or Helen, but for Jennifer and Ethan. That evening, sitting on the porch of her home, Jennifer shared the diary with Ethan. "It's like she's speaking directly to us across time," he remarked, after reading a few passages. "As if she knew we'd one day meet our great-grandfather Richard. Your great-grandmother had a wisdom that came from a very deep place," Jennifer explained. "She understood that true love transcends circumstances, time, even physical separation." Ethan carefully turned the diary's pages with reverence. "Can I take this with me to Milan? I'd like to translate some parts into Italian, maybe turn it into a project for school." "Of course you can, my love. This story belongs to you as much as it does to me. It's part of who we are." In the weeks that followed, Jennifer immersed herself in preparations for Ethan's departure and the grand celebration of the Foundation's 10th anniversary. Both events were close together. Ethan would leave for Milan right after the ceremony. The event was held at Lincoln Center, a place that symbolized the meeting of tradition and innovation, much like the Foundation itself. The grand hall was packed. Dignitaries, representatives from the textile industry, artisans from all over the country, exchange program scholars, and the extended family Jennifer had built over the years. In the front row, Charles and Mary Edwards, now doting grandparents to Patricia's children, watched with pride. Patricia, in her element as the master of ceremonies, guided the event with elegance and ease. Ethan, impeccable in a suit that marked his transition from adolescence to adulthood, smiled whenever his eyes met his mother's. And to Jennifer's surprise, Andrew had also come, sitting quietly a few rows back, present, respectful, never trying to claim a space that wasn't his. When it was Jennifer's turn to speak, she took the stage wearing the bird brooch Richard had given her. The same one Antonia had made decades earlier, a symbol of the promise that their paths would cross again. 12 years ago, a young seamstress was publicly humiliated at her graduation for cleaning classrooms to pay for her education. She began, without shame or bitterness, simply stating a historical fact. That same day, a textile businessman was in the audience watching everything closely. That unlikely encounter, which could have been just another example of human cruelty, became the first step of an extraordinary journey. Jennifer paused, looking at the brooch in her hands. But the story began long before, in 1975, when a young craftswoman from West Virginia and an ambitious businessman from New York City fell in love during a summer in the Appalachian Mountains. A love story interrupted by life circumstances, leaving behind a daughter who never knew her father, and a man who never knew he had fathered a child. A respectful silence filled the theater. Many already knew fragments of that story, but few had heard Jennifer tell it so openly in public. This foundation was born from the unlikely union of these stories separated by time, from the realization that even the most painful detours can eventually lead us to where we were meant to be. Today, we celebrate not just a decade of work, supporting American craftsmanship, but the redemption of a love that transcended generations. Jennifer held up the brooch for the audience. My grandmother Antonia made this brooch for Richard before they parted. A blue jay, symbolizing, as she said, the spirit that always returns home no matter how far it has flown. She believed that somehow, someday, their paths would cross again. And they did, not through her or my mother Helen, but through me and my son Ethan. Her eyes met Ethan's in the audience, his smile brimming with tears. The Antonia and Helen Wilson Foundation is our way of honoring that reunion, of turning a story of separation and loss into a legacy of unity and hope. Every scholarship recipient we send abroad, every craft technique we preserve, every community we support is part of this cycle of redemption. As she finished her speech, Jennifer was surprised by a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. But what touched her heart most was seeing Ethan, Charles, Mary Edwards, Patricia, and even Andrew applauding together. The unlikely and extraordinary family fate had built, piece by piece, from fragments that once seemed irreconcilable. During the reception that followed, Jennifer was approached by one of the honored artisans, Mrs. Johnson, an 87-year-old weaver from rural West Virginia, not far from where Antonia had been born. "Your story reminded me of my own mother," the woman remarked, her eyes shining with emotion. "She also believed no true love is ever completely lost, that it finds its way, even if it takes generations." Jennifer smiled, moved by the observation. Perhaps that's the real immortality, she reflected. Not through monuments or fortunes, but through the love we plant, which continues to bloom long after we're gone. 2 weeks later, Jennifer accompanied Ethan to JFK International Airport. The moment of farewell had arrived. Her son was leaving for Milan for the next 3 years of training. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself," she asked, trying to hold back the tears threatening to fall. "And call at least once a week." "I promise, Mom," he replied, hugging her tightly. "And you promise not to overwork yourself while I'm gone?" Jennifer laughed, wiping away an escaped tear. "I'll try. Patricia has already threatened to drag me on a forced vacation if I don't slow down." Both knew this separation, though painful, was a natural and necessary part of life. Ethan needed to forge his own path, discover his talents and passions just as Jennifer had done. "I have something for you," Jennifer said, handing him a small case. Ethan opened it and found a bird brooch, very similar to the one Jennifer wore but clearly new. "I commissioned it from an artisan who works with the foundation," she explained. "Oh, it's inspired by Antonia's original, but with small adaptations that represent our generation, so that no matter how far you go, you'll always remember the way back home." Ethan pinned the brooch onto his jacket, deeply moved by the gesture. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for never giving up even when everything seemed impossible, for building a better future for the two of us, brick by brick." The boarding announcement sounded, signaling it was time to say goodbye. "Go shine, my love," said Jennifer, giving him one last hug. "The world is waiting to see your talent." As she watched her son walk through the boarding gate, Jennifer felt a strange mix of emotions: pride, the ache of missing him already, worry, and above all, deep gratitude for everything they had lived through together. Back at the house in New York City, Jennifer sat on the porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on the extraordinary path life had taken her on. From the girl who grew up without a father, raised by a single mother, to the woman who cleaned classrooms to pay for her education. From the seamstress publicly humiliated to the internationally respected businesswoman. from the desperate single mother to the matriarch of a large, loving family. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Patricia. "So, how are you?" "Holding up after Ethan left." "Surviving," Jennifer replied with a bittersweet smile. "The house feels strangely empty." "That's why I called. Charles and Mary Edwards are going to the Hamptons this weekend, and they insisted you come too. They said they won't take no for an answer." Jennifer laughed, wrapped in the warmth of the family fate had given her. "Tell them I'll be there. I think a weekend at the beach is exactly what I need right now." That Saturday, as she walked along the shore of the Hamptons at sunset, Jennifer found the little cove Richard had shown her years before, the place that reminded him of Antonia with its unadorned beauty. She sat on the sand, watching the waves gently lap the shore. Touching the bird brooch she always wore, she felt connected to every link in that extraordinary chain of events that had shaped her life. Antonia and Richard, separated by fate, whose love had bloomed again through generations. Helen, who had left too soon, but whose strength and determination lived on through her daughter. Ethan, now flying on his own wings, but carrying the legacy of all those intertwined stories. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold when Jennifer finally stood up. As she walked back to the house, she saw Charles, Mary Edwards, and Patricia on the porch, watching the same sunset, waiting for her return. A family, built not just by blood, but by daily choices of love, respect, and acceptance. A home, created not by walls or material possessions, but by the certainty of belonging and being wholly embraced. Life had taught Jennifer that stories rarely follow the scripts we first imagine, that the greatest gifts often come disguised as challenges, that dignity isn't about never falling but how we rise after each fall. And above all, that true love, whether romantic, familial, or simply human, has the power to transcend time, space, and circumstance, always finding a way, somehow, to complete its unfinished circles. That evening, dining with Charles, Mary, Edwards, and Patricia in the beach house that held so many memories, Jennifer raised her glass in a silent toast to everyone who had contributed to her extraordinary journey, those present and those gone, those who supported her, and even those who tried to bring her down. Each in their own way had been a brick in building the strong, compassionate, and fulfilled woman she had become. The phone rang. It was Ethan, calling to say he had arrived safely in Milan and was already settled into his small apartment. The joy in his voice as he described the city, the school, and the new friends he was beginning to make filled Jennifer's heart with the certainty that despite the physical distance, the bonds between them would remain unshaken. After hanging up, Jennifer returned to the porch where the others were waiting to continue dinner. The starry sky of the Hamptons stretched endlessly over the ocean, reminding her that even the darkest nights are dotted with light. Even the hardest stories can have bright endings, if we have the courage to keep writing them, page after page, with dignity and hope. The girl who cleaned classrooms at night, the seamstress humiliated at graduation, the talented designer who only needed a chance, the rediscovered granddaughter, the devoted mother, the visionary director. All these women coexisted within Jennifer Wilson Montgomery, not as separate versions of herself, but as overlapping layers of experience and wisdom, each contributing to the complex and beautiful whole she had become. And as the stars shimmered over the ocean in the Hamptons, Jennifer knew with a quiet certainty deep in her soul that she was exactly where she was meant to be. That every tear, every struggle, every moment of despair, and every victory had been necessary steps in the intricate dance fate had choreographed for her. The story that had begun with the public humiliation of a young seamstress had transformed into a saga of redemption, reconciliation, and transcendent love. The circle started by Antonia and Richard decades earlier had finally closed, not with a return to the past, but with the promise of a future where that love would continue to flourish through new generations. And that, Jennifer realized with a serene smile, was the true victory. Not over those who had tried to diminish her, but over the forces of time and circumstance that threatened to pull apart what the heart insists on uniting. The songbird had returned home. The promise had been fulfilled. Love had found its way. End of story. Dear listeners, you've just followed a journey of resilience, dignity, and redemption. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more moving and inspiring tales. And tell us in the comments, do you believe love can truly transcend generations, as it did for Jennifer? We can't wait to read your thoughts.